There are a lot of traditions involved in this awards night. It's been happening now since 1959. Everyone and anyone in our industry that we all love so much has walked across some form of this stage, whether it was in Salisbury, North Carolina, or whether it was just down the road at the Lawrence E. Joel War Memorial Veterans Coliseum. I think that's the complete title. And then also here at this beautiful Benton Convention Center. Just a couple weeks ago, I was at my daughter's all-state chorus on the other side of that wall. And this is already much more entertaining than that. Don't tell her that I said that. But as tradition states, as I mentioned, we have a lot of traditions to this. We like to open the evening with the national anthem. And here in Winston-Salem, when you mention the national anthem, you mention the name Frank Thomas. And it's not the big hurt, it's the man with the big voice. And it's someone that I've been honored to introduce in this role. Anyone in this town, anyone in this state knows this voice and is familiar with it. And let's pay tribute to the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Frank Thomas with our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Frank. That's a man that has served this nation, and we owe him a debt of gratitude, not just for that, but for that performance of that national anthem right there. Thank you, Frank. It was just a couple of years ago that this awards night moved up the road just a little bit from Salisbury, North Carolina, here to Winston-Salem. And to say that this city has embraced the event and that has helped elevate it to the stature that we on the board have always believed that it deserved would be an understatement. And here to speak on behalf of this great city, which I say this every year. Now, they have a minor league baseball team here called the Dash. It's actually a hyphen, but we do get the we do get the idea behind the joke. From the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce now, we're joined by Mr. Mark Owens.
Thank you, Ryan, and a big fan. So this is an honor to be up here today. It's great to welcome you to the City of Arts and Innovation, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And we have been to the Dash game, and Boston Globe's own Bob Ryan and I got to see a game together, which was one of the highlights of my fandom of all time. So, Mr. Ryan, great to welcome you back again today. It's again an honor to welcome you to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, home to Hanes Brands headquarters, home to Champion Brand, home to the best hot sauce in America, Texas Pete. We are the largest producer of airplane seats in the country. Yes, we are home to cigarettes. We are also home to the first official Independence Day celebration in Old Salem in 1783. We are home to where George Washington came as an incoming president to study indoor plumbing. We are the home of the original Krispy Kreme donuts. There it is. We are home to the first arts council in the United States. And we are also home to the oldest women's college in Salem College in the country. We are home to the top 20 Wake Forest Demon Deacon football team. And I don't know if Coach Forbes is here yet, but we are home to the rising Wake Forest men's and women's basketball team at Wake Forest as well. Also home to one of the top HBCUs in the nation in Winston-Salem State, where Earl the Pearl once played right here in Winston-Salem. We are home to the beginning of ISP, which is now Learfield IMG, and little did you know that 16% of our workforce in Forsyth County are in the sports marketing and journalism industry. So we are home to the birthplace of sports media on the radio. And last but not least, we are home to the headquarters of the National Sports Media Association and this wonderful event. So welcome to Winston-Salem. We like to say we'll see you again here real soon. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, he mentioned the cigarettes. So as a young sports writer, the first awards dinner I ever attended was just a few blocks away at the old Winston Tower. This was in the old Winston Cup of the NASCAR days, and I was a member of the National Motorsports Press Association. And the good news is I won an award. The bad news is that I could not see it from all of the smoke from the free cigarettes that they handed out to the sports writers for the Winston Cup Series. Things have changed just a little bit. One thing that has not changed about this organization and this event is the man that we are proud to call our executive director. We mentioned Wake Forest Athletics. Dave Goren is a name synonymous with the Demon Deacons. He was just in Charlotte for the ACC Championship game last weekend. Dave Goren is a name synonymous with sportscasters and young sportscasters that grew up in the Carolinas. And for 13, as he likes to say, not years, seasons, he has been the executive director of the National Sports Media Association, and I'm going to call him up here now, Dave Goren. Wore a tuxedo. Look at that.
I wore the tux just for Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. A year ago, 6 months even, I'm not sure some of us saw this night happening, but here we are. A hearty congratulations to all of our award winners. It all happens by a vote of your peers, and it is truly a special achievement, so congratulations. Tonight would not be possible without the support of several people. Locally, Ben Sutton and Don Flo were and continue to be big believers in what we do. So thank you to them. Part of what they and other donors and sponsors give goes to fund attendance scholarships for some of the college students and young professionals you see here tonight. It also enabled them to participate in today's Sports Media Convergence Summit, where they learn lots from our industry pros. So thank you to all of our donors and sponsors for making that happen. Thank you also to our friends from CBS Sports, from Fox Sports and ESPN. It is so gratifying to have the support of the organizations whose people we honor this weekend. It is a small way of passing down the history of the sports media industry, so thank you all. To our board of directors, many thanks for helping guide me and this organization through the last 2 years so that we could all be here tonight. And we have a changing of the guard coming up at the end of the year. When we formed our first board here in Winston-Salem, Diane Blix, who I barely knew, who didn't know me, stepped up and took on the president's mantle, a leadership role for which I cannot thank her enough. Her 3 years as president are up, and she is stepping down but remaining on the board. Diane, please stand up and be recognized. Come on. And with the changing of the guard, 11-time Georgia Sportscaster of the Year, Wes Durham, will become our board president on January 1st. Wes, did Wes leave? Wes left. Wes has to be on the air at 7 tomorrow morning, but I look forward to working under him and continuing the great things we are doing at NSMA. Would all of our interns please stand up? Mike Collins from Forsyth Tech, Jake Stewart, Wake Forest, Joe Chambers from Mount St. Mary's, Sahil Dewan from Montclair State, and Elena Turnbull from UNC Wilmington. Thank you guys for all of your assistance. I have to tell you, though, Elena does not ever want to see another name badge. She typed them all. And finally, our volunteers, if you would please stand. We couldn't put on this weekend without you, so thank you for all your hard work. Stand up, please. If you're wondering, our Big House Gaines College Basketball Coach of the Year Awards will return in June. I hope you will too. So thank you again, all of you, for being here, and congratulations again to all of our winners. Hope you have a great night. Thank you.
It's great to see Jim Nantz here tonight. He's going to be honored a little later in the evening, but those of us who are on the board of the NSMA, those of us who grew up wanting to work in this industry, you're someone that's been an inspiration, but particularly for what you do every single year for young, aspiring sportscasters around the nation. And for more on that, a man who works tirelessly to work with the young people who want to make their living in this industry. John Chalesnik joins us now.
Happy holidays, everybody. Congratulations to all of tonight's honorees as well. 13 years ago, when we decided to create an award to recognize the nation's most outstanding collegiate sports broadcaster, we wanted to name it in honor of somebody whose combination of personal and professional excellence matched what we want the award to represent. Jim Nantz was an easy selection for that, especially because of a neat coincidence that as I was trying to decide who I wanted to approach, I read his book, Always by My Side, about his relationship with his dad, who was battling Alzheimer's. And that convinced me that besides what I knew about Jim professionally, he was the right guy personally as well, that the values were shared. So he's been a fabulous person to have involved with our award and to have his name on it. 10 years ago, the prestige of the award was increased when NSMA invited us to present it here at the annual banquet. Tonight is even extra special because it's the first time that scheduling allows Jim to be here to meet our honorees and to help present them. So if you will, please welcome the guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer in another hour or two, Jim Nantz, to the stage. And also want to make sure I thank Jim's assistant, Melissa. She has been fabulous. There have been times when she's had to put out there's a lot of moving parts with the award. And Melissa has always been there to orchestrate things and to put out some unexpected fires. And she never makes me feel like I'm putting upon her. She's always very gracious about it. And Jim as well. Jim has given more to the award in support and time than I could have ever dreamt or had the ambition to ask him to do. He's done on his own, and it's been wonderful. So our 2020 Nantz Award winner is unable to be here tonight. Scotty Gaines won the award as a senior at Arizona State. He graduated in just 3 years and then made that look even better or built upon that by getting a job immediately upon graduation on air at KUSA Television in Denver, where he's now a reporter and an anchor. I looked at his reel about a month ago, and it was super cool to see that the same creativity and fabulous writing and personality, all that we saw on his Nantz reel, he still brings to the table professionally. It was wonderful to see. Our 2021 winner is here with us tonight. And like Scotty, he's quite an achiever. We already announced it back in the spring, but this young man just finished his senior year at Virginia Tech. Almost immediately upon graduation, was hired by the university to be their women's basketball voice and their baseball voice. And like Scotty, this individual is a fabulous young man, humble, giving, always, I say relentlessly energetic and optimistic, but not in a put on or fake kind of way, but a very genuine kind of way. So it's an honor for me to introduce to you tonight the winner of the 2021 Jim Nantz Award from Virginia Tech. Please welcome Evan Hughes.
Wow. Well, that doesn't happen every day, right? As a 22-year-old getting to meet a Hall of Famer. Let's hear it for Jim getting inducted into the Hall of Fame tonight. And what an honor for me to get to stand here in front of all of you. I've admired so many of you for so long, and as someone who just graduated from college, I am truly honored. I will never forget being up here in this moment and meeting all of you tonight. This is a full circle moment for me. You know, there's different chapters of everybody's life. And I think back to June of 2017. I had just graduated high school. And 2 weeks later, so excited to begin my chapter as a student at Virginia Tech. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster. And so within the first 3 weeks, the first thing I got to do as a student was attend the NSMA Award weekend here in North Carolina. And I check in and I get my name badge and it says Evan Hughes, Virginia Tech. And I said, wow, that's incredible. And then 4 years later, the final thing I get to do as a student at Virginia Tech was to be named the Jim Nantz Award winner and be here in front of you all today. So it is a full circle moment. It is an honor to be here. And there's so many people that I'd like to thank. First of all, John Shalesnik, thank you so much for not only putting on this award and helping college broadcasters around the country, but for helping all broadcasters around the country. Thanks for being a champion for collegiate broadcasting. Jim, I can't believe that my name gets to be associated with yours. It just means so much to me and my family, and I am so thrilled that you're getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. So thank you so much. Just a couple more thanks, and then I promise I'll move on. I wouldn't have gone to Virginia Tech if it weren't for one individual. I think everybody in this room has had a mentor, a role model, somebody that they have looked up to. And for me, as somebody who grew up in Virginia, that was the 11-time Virginia Sports Broadcaster of the Year, and the former voice of the Hokies, Bill Roth, who's in attendance tonight. If we could give a round of applause for Bill. Bill, you decided to take a leap of faith coming back to Virginia Tech to start our sports media and analytics program. I'm not the broadcaster, let alone the person I am today, if it weren't for you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your mentorship. This might have my name on it, but this is a team award for Virginia Tech and our School of Communication. And lastly, the two people who are the most important people in my life, my mom, Lynn, and my dad, Kelly, who's holding up the cell phone right now. I told him there would be video of this, but he's holding up the phone. We could give them a round of applause, too. Thank you. You know, my dad, when I was in high school, I started doing broadcasting. The first analyst I ever had at Patriot Talk Live was my dad, Kelly Hughes. We called games together for 4 years. You will always be my favorite analyst. Thank you for pushing me to follow my dream and become passionate about something. And lastly, Mom, you inspire me every day, how you show others compassion and what love looks like. I just want to say it is an honor to be your son, and I love you all very much. Thank you so much, and congratulations to all the award winners. Thank you.
One of my favorite things about the job, and also my least favorite things about all of our jobs, is the travel, right? But what I love about going into different states and different regions, if I'm covering a college football game on a Saturday, is getting it on Friday and dialing up AM radio on the rental car. Because I like to listen to the high school football broadcasts. And I like doing that in each region because you can tell who the dominant voice of the college football team in that region is. When I go to Virginia, all these guys sound like Bill Roth. And when I went to the University of Tennessee, they all sound like John Ward. And growing up in the Carolinas, everyone sounded like Woody Durham. Wes Durham's father, Wes, who left earlier and left. Thanks, Wes. And when I traveled into Kentucky, everyone sounded like Kaywood Ledford. Kaywood Ledford was the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats for almost 40 years. He was from Harlan, Kentucky, coal mining country. He got started calling high school football games there in Harlan. And as I'm riding around the bluegrass hills of Kentucky and I'm listening to AM radio, everyone sounds like Kaywood Ledford, and they're all brutal on these coaches and on these players. And I was the son of a college football official, so they're really brutal on the refs. Well, as a student at the University of Tennessee, I was working for the video crew. We had a game, Tennessee at Kentucky. And we're sitting there throwing down a hot dog before the game in the press box, and Kaywood Ledford walked through the press box. And we knew at this point this was going to be his 39th and last season on the microphone for the Kentucky Wildcats. So I, being a sportscasting nerd, jumped up out of my chair, knocked my plate on the floor, grabbed a program off the stack and a pen, and ran over to Kaywood Ledford. Mr. Ledford, can I get your autograph? And he said, "Slow down, kid, I'm 70. You act like I'm going to run away from you." And so I sat down and talked with him for about 20 minutes. And I asked him, I said, "Listen, everyone, all these radio guys I listen to doing these high school games, they sound just like you, but they're brutal on their criticism of their coaches, their home team." And he said to me, he said, "I hope so, because that's how I've always called it." And he said that Adolph Rupp told him as a young broadcaster, "If I'm screwing the game up, Kaywood, then I need you to tell everyone that I'm doing the wrong thing. Be hard on me." And I said, "Did he like that?" He said, "No." About 10 years later, he said, "I should have never told you to tell him to be hard on me," but they did it. But Kaywood Ledford, one of the legendary voices of collegiate sports broadcasting, is finally a member of the NSMA Hall of Fame. His family could not be here tonight, so I will gladly accept this on his behalf, one of my childhood heroes, Kaywood Ledford, longtime voice of the Kentucky Wildcats. Heads up, Hall of Famers, those are substantial. So when the photographer says, "Hey, one more," it's probably about the time I'm going to drop it. But it's an honor. We have a lot of Hall of Famers going in tonight, and the first of those, the great Kaywood Ledford. To my earlier point about traveling the country, when I finally got to go out to the West Coast, when you were in Southern California, high school football, small college football, baseball, whatever it was, everyone sounded like Vin Scully, Jerry Coleman. But when I went into Northern California, from Fresno to Modesto to Sacramento, they all kept saying, "Holy Toledo." And I was like, what are these people doing out here? And then I realized it was all a tribute to the great Bill King, legend of the Bay Area. And to accept on behalf of Bill King and his induction into the Hall of Fame as a man who knew him as well as anyone, 16 years with him in the booth, Robert Blount.
Before getting started, I just want the record to reflect that a Jim Nantz production warmed up the crowd for Robert Bwan. So, kind of enjoying that. But Bill would be honored to have won this award. But awards and events like this, he really felt like should be really celebrated by those who are alive to enjoy them. And so he'd probably be pretty pissed off if I just sat here and waxed nostalgic and told you a bunch of anecdotal stuff and bored you all to tears. So I'm not going to do that. But I will tell you instead, I'll tell you 3 fun facts about Bill King that you cannot find in the bio that's in the program. One of which is that lots of fans and experts swear that Bill belongs in the Basketball Hall of Fame. There's this moment from the 1975 NBA Finals, Game 4, as the Warriors were trying to sweep the Washington Bullets. Bill could praise someone and insult them all within the same sentence.
Caray give the ball to Barry. Barry still has a shot. Barry crowded by Reardon, who fouls him. Reardon was manhandling him into near fight. Reardon trying to get away, and Alvin Adams was out to break up the fight, and Adams now is in a wild slugging match. The 245-pound Wesley Unseld started to trade punches with Adams. Adams, one of the great gentlemen in the game.
And you're out of the game. Yes,
He's thrown Adams out of the game. This is disgraceful. Richie Powers has just committed, I think, the most disgraceful decision of a very distinguished officiating career. I cannot believe this.
So yeah, sometimes he got his thoughts out there and in plain sight. But his basketball roots, they ran pretty deep to the days when he was the voice of the Bradley Braves, along with 2 other competing broadcasts at the time. This is in the 40s. You had competing broadcasts. He was an aspiring broadcaster along with 2 other guys that turned out to be Chick Hearn and Jack Brickhouse, all doing games at the same time. Who knew? Fan fact number 2, lots of fans and experts swear that Bill belongs in the Football Hall of Fame. If there were 3 guys that were most responsible for what the sports world knows as the Oakland Raiders, one would be Al Davis, the former owner. Second, maybe it's John Facenda because he voiced all of those NFL films of The Autumn Wind is a Pirate, right? So that added to the mystique. But Bill would definitely be in the top 3. He called 3 Super Bowls over 26 seasons, and this famous Holy Roller play at San Diego, it just showed that Bill could make fun of someone and make it sound like it belonged in the broadcast.
Robisky and Banaszak are the backs. Slot right. Branch inside. Bradshaw, Stabler back. Here comes the rush. He sidesteps. Can he throw? He can't. The ball flipped forward is loose. A wild scramble. 2 seconds on the clock. Casper grabbing the ball. It is ruled a fumble. Casper has recovered in the end zone. The Oakland Raiders have scored on the most zany, unbelievable, absolutely impossible dream of a play. Madden is on the field. He wants to know if it's real. They said yes. Get your big butt out of here. He does.
Classic, right? Can anybody get away with that these days? But Madden and Bill stayed friends through the years, well beyond the silver and black days. Now, of course, there's not a damn thing that I could say to add to his credentials as a baseball announcer because he's in Cooperstown, right? That speaks for itself. So in closing, fun fact number 3 is that over the time I spent working with Bill at the A's, the coolest stuff about him had nothing or little to do with sports. He was a student of history, a patron of arts and theater. He loved classic country music, which inspired the creation of my syndicated show called Country Fastball. And many sports moments were defined by his calls, but the life and career of Bill King was never fully defined by sports. So while I'm not sure what advice he would offer to aspiring broadcasters today, I can at least offer the greatest lesson that I learned from him, and that's to have a life beyond the score and the standings. Follow your passions beyond the game. And that's the thing that I learned the most from him. On behalf of Bill's family and radio teams, Warriors, Raiders, and A's fans everywhere, thank you for this amazing honor.
I could just listen to audio clips all night. I looked out there and a lot of you had your eyes closed because it's, you could see the picture in your mind. That's amazing. Get your big butt out of here. A lot of us have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Wikipedia. It's usually not right. I one time was apparently a pit reporter for Fox Sports. Never happened. Shanks, you know that. However, when I look at Dick Young's bio, it's pretty accurate. Our next inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame, of course, was elected into Cooperstown decades ago, former president of the Baseball Writers Association of America. The very first sentence of his bio, Richard Leonard Young was an American sports writer best known for his direct and abrasive style. The first time I walked into a press box with the New York baseball core, this is the personality that I had in mind. This is a man who wrote of Tom Seaver. He was, quote, a pouting, griping, morale-breaking clubhouse lawyer. Is there any more New York than that in a column? He covered the game the way that he saw it. He wrote the way that he felt. And as a result, we as sports fans and as baseball fans have benefited from that. That's why he's in Cooperstown, and that's why tonight, finally, Dick Young is being inducted into the NSMA Hall of Fame. Accepting on his behalf is Jenny Young Mitchell, his daughter.
Dave, you weren't kidding about the weight of that award. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It is a true pleasure to be here tonight, and I'd like to thank the National Sports Media Association for the recognition of my father. Especially after so many years, it's nice to know that he is still remembered. I want to thank Dave for his hospitality, along with your volunteers and your board. I really enjoyed being prepared for tonight and going upstairs to the spare room and getting that box and pulling it down. You know, we all have that box filled with treasures and memories, the one that you plan to pass down to your younger generations. I started gathering the articles, papers aged by time, articles that my dad had written, articles that people wrote about my dad. It had probably been almost a decade since I had been in that box, and I just started reading. And all these memories came flooding back, and all those wonderful feelings. And I began to laugh and smile over most of it and just thought, boy, my dad, he was feisty and fiery, wasn't he? I think in today's description, he would definitely be considered a badass. He absolutely never shied away from confrontation. He didn't know the meaning of sugarcoating anything, and he could care less whether or not his views were popular. He always spoke his truth. Our parents moved us from Brooklyn to the suburbs of New Jersey when I was about 6 months old. Later, there had been 2 more born, and that rounded it up to 7 girls and 1 boy. While growing up, I can remember the feeling that my father's profession was very family-friendly. Many heartfelt memories, times remembering of that 2-car caravan being packed up, driving down to Treasure Island for spring training, staying at the Colonial Inn on the Gulf of Mexico. I can remember as a young girl looking up at Carmen Barra and just thinking how beautiful she was. And all those young wives just running around trying to keep order with their children running around the pool. And then, of course, there was the outings up at Bear Mountain in upstate New York, the baseball writers against the Mets. And then, of course, there was the Baseball Writers Association dinner in New York City, where we would sneak down to the ballroom to watch the performances. Dad would be dressed up as his friend Bill Gallo's Baseman Bertha. He always loved that event, and we enjoyed it as well. But there were the trade-offs for all those good times. Many meals without Daddy there, many long nights that we wouldn't see him, But Daddy always felt that you had to be at the ballpark before the game and after the game to get the angle. And then, of course, there were the long baseball, during baseball season, the long road trips. I'm sorry. Daddy loved baseball. He loved his life in baseball. He worked very hard. And it's very presumptuous of me to say this considering the company that is in this room, but I think he was the best. It was apparent to me when I was reading those articles that there were a lot of colleagues that had a lot of wonderful things to say about him. When I got off the plane from Florida on September 1st, 1987, the day after that my dad died, I remember grabbing the press and the news, wondering whether or not it had hit the press or not. I'm sorry, I grabbed the Post. On the back page of the Post, in big caps, it said "Forever Young," with a big picture of my dad in his writing position. Inside, on page 74, read "Hail the Champ," with 3 columnist features: Normie Miller, who in our house was called Uncle Normie, Michael Marley, and Phil Chechnik. In Phil's article, he nailed it perfectly. In part, he wrote, "Admit it, you read Young. You read him every day, and you were disappointed that when you bought that paper and his column wasn't in it, you were not happy. You loved to be infuriated with him, didn't you? And you loved and admired his guts, don't you? He was blunt. Young got more across in a couple of sentences than most columnists would have in a 3-part series. You never put down Dick Young's column and wondered, what in the world is he trying to say? You knew exactly what he was trying to say. It was just that you couldn't have cared less. And as much as he ticked off so many readers, he was the one who worked for the reader." End of quote. The next day, Michael Katz of the Daily News wrote, "The city is somewhat empty now, a piece of its guts torn away with the passing of Dick Young. Guts aren't pretty, but they're just vital." In part, he wrote, "We knew it was bad, but we somehow couldn't believe the prognosis. It wasn't that Dick Young was going to die. It was that Dick Young wasn't going to write again. There is an emptiness now in New York. Dick Young was New York. Maybe he was the New York that you always got into an argument with, but he was our New York, and I wouldn't have traded him for all the Carl Sandburgs of Chicago." End of quote. Like I said, Daddy loved baseball, and he always worked to keep the bar high for the game, with much controversy holding players to a higher standard, demanding that they conduct themselves as examples to the youth of today. Daddy's dear friend, Phil Pepe, wrote in part, "He has been the conscience of baseball, the public defender, fighting with his typewriter for the little guy, protecting the fan. He fought endless battles on behalf of his colleagues, many of them half his age, too young to understand, too immature to care, too egocentric to appreciate. To me, he had been my coworker, competitor, boss, advisor, and most of all, my friend. Many of us wanted to be Dick Young, but none of us were." End of quote. I think it's a big testimony to a man's character is what his colleagues have to say about him. Uncle Normie wrote that he recalled in 1948 when a bigot in New Orleans viciously berated Jackie Robinson in print. Robinson asked Dick to help him to write a letter that might help put this racist nut in his place. Dick later showed me that letter. This beautiful, dignified, and elegant put-down of prejudice was a piece of art. Then there was the story I heard after Daddy died, a story that many of his critics didn't know, and maybe you had heard or not. Joe Trimble, Daddy's colleague at the Post, was sitting at his typewriter staring at a blank piece of paper. An hour ago, Don Larson pitched the perfect game in the World Series, and now the press box downtown is freaking out. Where is Trimble's story? Daddy calmly rolled a piece of paper into his typewriter, typed out a sentence, takes it out, passes it to Trimble. The imperfect man pitched a perfect game. 45 minutes later, Joe Trimble's story was finished. It's the best story he ever wrote in his career and received awards for it. And Dick Young never said a word. And that was my dad. It was devastating for my family when my dad passed away. We really would have liked for our parents to grow old together. And it was a shame for New York fans and colleagues that Dick Young died so young. He still had many stories to tell and a lot of arguments to still have. I gladly accept this recognition of my father in honor of my mother, because while my dad was out trying to be the best sports reporter, she was at home making sure that all 8 of us were home for dinner and to live another day, which was not an easy task. On behalf of my siblings, I proudly say that we are all very proud to say that Dick Young is our dad. And I hope that you enjoyed tonight this little stroll down memory lane with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Lori. We get into these sports, right, because we love them, and we work really hard to make it about us, not insert yourself into the story. But when you're a man like Dick Young, you become part of the legacy of your sport and of the teams that you cover just because you're that good. As a young kid growing up in the southeastern United States in the 80s, there's that phrase that gets thrown around a lot now, the soundtrack of your life. The soundtrack of my life in the McGee house in Raleigh, North Carolina, 80s was TBS Superstation and listening to Skip Caray call another meaningless 3-1 mid-July game when the Braves were about 900 games out of first place. And it was the most entertaining play-by-play that anyone has ever done. Skip Caray is our next inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame, and accepting on his behalf is his son, Josh.
Ryan, thank you very much. And perfect segue. A lot is going to be about that and about the 80s and about Braves baseball and TBS. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone, to Dave, to the committee. What a wonderful evening, and I'm very honored to be a part of this. As I prepared for this speech, I thought it was only appropriate to think of what Dad would say right now, because ultimately this is his award. And 3 things come to mind. First and foremost, he would make a very stupid joke, because that's what Dad did. He would make dad jokes. So here you go. Who did the dyslexic devil worshiper sell his soul to? Santa. I know. I didn't say it was a good joke, but at least it's seasonal. The second thing, and this is going to be tough, he would thank my mom. When Dave first told me about this award back in 2019, my mother, Paula Caray, was still with us. Unfortunately, a lot has changed in our world since 2019. My mom sadly passed away last August, She was one of the hundreds of thousands we have lost due to COVID. You know the old saying, behind every great man is a great woman, and Mom epitomized that. She was Dad's biggest champion and continued his fight for his induction into Cooperstown until her final days. Even though that mission was not accomplished, she would have loved this. When Dad died in 2008, Mom was at every function. Didn't matter how big or small, she did it to remember his legacy. She spoke then and would be up here right now if she could. And boy, I really wish she was. I miss her every day, but I'm strengthened by the fact that she and Dad right now are somewhere up above, martinis in hand, enjoying this moment, and I'm okay with that. But I'll say this as well. I thought I knew pain, but you don't really know it until you have to say goodbye to someone over Zoom. And now finally the main topic, and what I really wanted to get to and what Dad would have wanted to on this night. Dad would want to talk about team, right? I mean, that's what we do. I think we're all, at heart, we're all frustrated athletes. I know I am. And that's why we do what we do. We cover teams, we cover athletes, we cover individuals, but ultimately we cover the teams and how they perform and what they do. So imagine being me as a kid, 10, 11 years old, growing up in the 90s in Atlanta. And I would come home from school around 3 o'clock. I'd flip on WGN, and there's my grandfather calling games for the Chicago Cubs. And then I would go off and I'd do my homework, or I'd do Little League or karate or piano or whatever my parents had me doing. And then I'd flip the TV on again at 7:30, and there's Dad calling games for the Atlanta Braves. Something you don't appreciate when you're 10, but when you're 40 and you're in the business, you really do appreciate it later on. There's another old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that is true in most cases. And when it came to Harry and Skip Caray, they were similar in a lot of ways, but not always. With Grandpa, you knew he was the voice of the Cubs, right? We know the old gimmick, the thick glasses, the hi, how you do, that whole thing. Just like Vin Scully with the Dodgers, Jack Buck with the Cardinals, Harry Kalas with the Phillies. Grandpa relished his role as the big man on campus with the Northsiders. But it was a role built on individualism, great marketing, and a lot of Budweisers. But Dad was part of a team. He, along with Pete Van Wieren and Ernie Johnson Sr., were part of an ensemble cast that brought baseball to millions in places like North Carolina, Alabama, Montana, the Dakotas, and New Mexico, and other places that didn't have Major League Baseball. And Dad was very proud of that. I guess what I'm saying here tonight is, if you're inducting my dad, really you're inducting a piece of Pete and Ernie as well. And what made it so great is the trio did it with three completely different personalities. Dad was a smart aleck. He would talk about the guy sitting down the first base line wearing the funny hat. Van Wieren was the stats geek. Pete loved numbers, and boy, would he love analytics and what's going on today. He was also probably the best prepared of the trio. And then Ernie Sr. He was Atlanta's Vin Scully. He was the neighborly sort. He was the type of guy who would tell you to pull up a chair, sip on some sweet tea on a hot summer afternoon, put your feet up on the back deck and watch some Atlanta Braves baseball. 3 men, 3 personalities, 1 team, and it was beautiful. Others came that brought their own panache to the broadcast, John Sterling in the 80s, Don Sutton, Joe Simpson in the 90s and 2000s, but it was Skip, Pete, and Ernie who were the ones who started it. I want to give you a quick story here. I think many of us in here either know or at least have met Ernie Johnson Jr., and you know what a remarkable human being he is and what he and his wife did for Michael Johnson, who just passed away a month ago. Well, in order to create terrific people like Ernie Johnson Jr., you have to have a foundation. You have to have great parents. So let me tell you a little something about Ernie Johnson Sr., true story. Dad and Pete are hired by Ted Turner in 1976 after Turner buys the team to become broadcasters for the Braves. This is after Turner decided to put his 100-loss ball club on a superstation and air them every night nationwide. He actually thought people would watch, and he was right. Dad and Pete would join Ernie, who had moved with the team from Milwaukee, first as a ball player, then later as a broadcaster. He had been with the team already for 10 years, so he was the heir apparent, right? He was the veteran. He was the guy who knew everything. Dad, meanwhile, had begun his career in Atlanta as the radio voice for the Atlanta Hawks. So he knew Ernie, and he knew his work, and he respected him, and he liked him. And he wound up revering Ernie as a second father. Well, he made it clear that he was going to respect Ernie, and Ernie was going to take the lead in whatever they did. So, in the first game of the 1976 season, on the first game ever on the Superstation, Atlanta is in San Diego to play the Padres. Pete is on radio taking care of the radio network. Dad and Ernie are on the TV side, and Ernie, the veteran holdover, is going to call the first 2 to 3 innings of the very first game, with Dad serving as his, quote, analyst. Coming out of the break, the game is about to begin. Dad gives the starting lineup for the Braves and then the starting defense for the Padres. And then he says, just as the game is about to begin, now to give you the play-by-play story is the voice of the Braves, Ernie Johnson, Sr. Braves go 1, 2, 3. Game goes to break. Ernie looks at my father, and he says, which means take your headsets off. And my dad's already thinking, oh no, what have I done? Which is something he did a lot in his career. But Dad takes his headset off because Ernie didn't want the truck to hear this. And he leans over and he puts an arm around my dad, and he says, young man, as far as I'm concerned, we are all voices of the Braves. Don't ever forget that. And he never did. If you knew my old man, he could be insightful, extremely funny, and caring, and that's the man I knew. But if you crossed him, look out. Table 1 knows what I'm talking about. Dad was tough. Some of you, I'm sure, experienced that firsthand. When I was at the ballpark, at times I would see him rip producers, directors, production assistants for making mistakes. I can't say I was proud of him for that, but it came down to this. He cared. His feeling was the best way for everyone, for the team, to have a job after the season or after a game even, was to put the best show possible together, and if someone misstepped or didn't do their job, it put the show and the team on the line. Could he have handled things differently? Sure. But Dad, deep down, was a lamb. And sometimes you have to be a lion in order to be the lamb you really are. I can't tell you how grateful I am and humbled I am to be up here accepting this for Dad and to do it around so many of his contemporaries. My only wish is that the families for Pete and Ernie get the same opportunity that I'm getting here tonight. Pete and Ernie were as much a part of my dad's success as anyone because they were a great team. So I'll say it again. If it's Skip Caray you're inducting a piece of Pete and Ernie as well. Before Bally's, before Root, before Fox, before ESPN, and heck, even before Cubs baseball on WGN, it was the Braves on TBS who babysat a generation of little boys who would become baseball players and coaches at several different levels. And if you think that doesn't have an impact, consider this. According to Baseball America, of the top 12 colleges with the most players on Major League opening day rosters in 2021, 9 of them are schools hailing from the Southeast. And I know many of you will say, well, Josh, how many of today's players even know who Skip, Pete, and Ernie are? And that's a fair point. Frankly, not many, if any. But their fathers do. And it was the fathers who passed the game down to their sons. Skip, Pete, and Ernie all played a role in that. And they did it as a team. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember one of those midsummer games that meant nothing. And back then, Ted Turner had this inventory of terrible black and white movies, like monster movies. And I remember they came out of break one day and they were showing like a clip of some invasion film with this octopus-looking alien attacking people. Coming up tonight at 8 o'clock on the Superstation. It's, Attack of the Whatevers. And Ernie goes, hey, Skip, what do you think that was? And Skip said, I don't know, but if they don't watch, Ted might send it to their house. I love those days, and that's what we just talked about. It's all about bringing the experience home to people, right? Whether it's through the written word or whether it's over the radio or whether it's on television, the internet, whatever our medium is. William Nack, our next inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame, is best known for his ability to humanize the racehorse. To hear William Nack talk about Secretariat was to hear Grantland Rice talk about Babe Ruth. It was to read any of the great writers, any great sportscasters talk about being able to see these great human athletes in person. The emotion that William Nack always expressed when he talked about these horses, and to me, as a motorsports fan and as an aspiring motorsports journalist, it was also about how he talked about the race car, talking about monsters, talking about the beasts of it. And with all due respect to the great motorsports journalism that has come out of this very valley, this very foothill where we are with stock cars, the only motorsports piece I ever took down as a college student and broke it down like a piece of music was the piece that William Nack wrote about A.J. Foyt at the end of his career at the Indianapolis 500 in 1991. I studied that thing like the Bible. And to this day, I will pull it out at least 2 or 3 times a year and read it. And that's why it's an honor for all of us tonight to be here for the induction of William Nack into the NSMA Hall of Fame. Presenting for Mr. Nack is Jim Tepman, and accepting will be Carolyn Sterrick.
Thank you very much, everyone. Dave, thanks everyone for having us here tonight. I'm delighted, if slightly out of place, to be here tonight, except that it's always an honor to be associated with Bill Nack. Gifted, caring, talented beyond measure as he was, and a friend of mine for half a century. We met at Newsday in 1968, the Long Island newspaper, where he joined the staff after returning from service in Vietnam. I happened to be his last editor before he leapt to fame as a sports writer. It's also where my wife, who is from Argentina and knows horses and Spanish, blushed rather than translate words Bill had heard at the Belmont stables. It's also where finally he fulfilled his lifelong dream of devoting his considerable energies and focusing his writing on horses and sport. Let me say a few things about Bill. He had a unique lens, a unique perspective. One fall, when Bill was still covering what he called the rear end of the horse, we wanted him to write about sewers, which was an issue, a political issue on Long Island. We wanted him to talk about the $250 million that voters were being asked to approve. He said, nope, I'm going to write about the minnows and the clams and the crabs and all the little fish and the impact of wastewater that is being untreated on the Great South Bay. He was more concerned there about the risk and the dangers to the bay than he was to the cost of the thing. And of course, the voters agreed with him and approved the project. It's also triggered Bill's reaction when he watched in 1974 the great horse Ruffian collapse on the back stretch of a match race at Belmont Stakes. Bill dashed out of the press box, down the grandstands, across the track, yards away from the oncoming horses, across the infield so he could look at Ruffian in Ruffian's last gasps of air on this earth. Bill produced a treasury of books. After Newsday, he wrote for ESPN and GQ and had a glorious career at Sports Illustrated. Always, thankfully, he relied on his own instincts. His Sports Illustrated sidekick, Billy Reed, who also covered horse racing, tells the story of the assignment that he received for covering the Preakness. He told Bill that his assignment was to write about the Preakness in 250 lines. Bill scoffed. I don't even get warmed up in 250 lines. And indeed, Hugh Delahanty, who was one of his editors at Sports Illustrated, recalls the other end of the process. Bill Nack, Hugh recalled fondly, I remember his flawless prose. He would submit a 5,000-word piece, prose poetry on deadline, and you only had to add a comma or two to make it perfect. Bill was a gifted writer and has been honored as such. He won the Eclipse Award as the nation's top racing writer for 7 times. He's in the National Museum of Racing Hall of Fame. His books were gems, including, of course, the classic book, Secretariat, which became the classic movie, Secretariat. He won the Penn ESPN Lifetime Achievement for literary sports writing. Literary, his sports writing indeed was. His longtime friend, Roger Ebert, called him, quote, a born storyteller who treated literature like a gourmet. He relished it, savored it, inhaled it, unquote. Colleagues would smile, recalling Bill's routine battle with deadlines. He took longer to write because he took extra time to find just the right word. I would say he also took the extra time to do extra reporting, regardless of the subject. Chess player Bobby Fischer, race car driver A.J. Foyt, basketball coach Roy Williams, heavyweight boxer George Foreman come to mind. His insatiable curiosity invariably produced new, interesting, and compelling facts. Then, and wonderfully, there was the Bill Nack smile. It wasn't merely a creased forehead or a wink or a quick grin. His smile was a total body experience. I particularly remember seeing Bill in Baltimore as the elevator door opened on the 2nd floor at Pimlico, and out of the shadow he started walking down towards the press box. We probably hadn't seen each other in a decade, but when our eyes met, there was Bill, wrinkled shirt, well-worn sport jacket, with his press pass dangling around his neck, and notebooks and scraps of paper in every pocket. Bill's smile, it seemed, started with his big toe, came up his leg, he hitched his belt, straightened his back, arched his shoulders, and then his lips started to curl. Eyes twinkling, his smile stretched from ear to ear, forehead to toe, a whole body experience for sure, radiating joy. Joy indeed, but there also was great wisdom. His great sense of where he was, and in particular, where sports fit in the great human drama. Most of those who encountered Bill during his starry career also know that he loved reciting the last page of Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby. I can envision Bill in much the same way as Gatsby, late in his career driving down Kentucky's rich blue hills to 30 miles south of Louisville to Paris and the Claiborne Farm, and he spotted the sign on the dock, the Claiborne Farm sign, the home and resting place of the great Secretariat. Just as Gatsby had gazed from Long Island's great Gold Coast to the light at Daisy's dock, face to face with history and contemplating his place in it, Bill saw Claiborne Farm and glorious Big Red, but also saw the world beyond it. Tonight, we honor Bill Nack. Congratulations to the SMA selectors. They've made a wise choice. Tonight, we honor Bill Nack's family. Congratulations to them. They know better than any the energy, the intensity, the emotion, and enthusiasm he devoted to his craft. To them, we say thank you for sharing Bill. Tonight, we honor the artistry, perspective, wisdom in our sports reporting in the person of the great storyteller and great friend, Bill Nack. And now let me introduce Carolyn Sterick, his widow.
And I want to thank Dave and the National Sports Media Association recognizing my beloved Bill. I believe that his spirit is here with us tonight. They combined his head and heart in the wisdom that he brought to us all. And I think if he were here tonight, he would give you his take on the recent death of Medina Spirit, the lockdown of baseball, and the unlikely return of Tiger and his son. A few years ago, our friend and film critic Gus Molasses, who writes for the Sarasota Magazine, asked Bill at the end of his life in a long interview to describe the final scene of his life as if it were a horse race. After giving it some thought, Bill imagined that when he reached the finish line, he was ready to close his eyes and say goodbye, and so he did. Bill played with dignity and courage his last inning, his final round, and ran that home stretch with a large lead ahead of us all. Like Jim Valvano, Bill was not one to give up, and he was here for us all in all he did, and I carry him in my heart every day. Thank you.
Might we all be remembered like that? And that brings us to the remembrances of those that we lost, not just in 2020, but in 2019 as well. It has been a particularly tough time because of all that we've had to deal with. But it feels like a particularly brutal year when it comes to the losses that we have all suffered as members of this industry. These are the names, just some of the names of those that we've lost since 2019. Let's continue to remember the families of these people. Let's continue to remember those of us who still feel that emptiness when we go into the press box. And let's all do our jobs in a way that pays tribute to those who worked alongside us for so long. Our next inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame is a man I've only met once, Larry Merchant. I was standing next to him outside of the HBO headquarters in New York. I'd just been in a meeting and someone walked by and looked over and said, "Hey, it's the Rocky guy." And I looked at Larry and I said, "Are you the Rocky guy?" He goes, "I am 100% the Rocky guy." I texted all of my friends that cover boxing for a living, about a half a dozen, and what I asked was, what should I say about Larry Merchant? And the response from 3 of the 6 was, he was the GOAT who covered the GOAT. The greatest of all time who covered the greatest of all time. And he is our latest inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame. He's in California and could not make it all the way out here to see us tonight, so I will accept on his behalf. Jim Nantz has already been on the stage once tonight, and now it's time to honor him and bring him back up here again. To start that, we're going to bring up Caroline. Caroline Nantz.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Caroline Nantz, and I am Jim's eldest daughter. As I look around the room, I see his family members, friends, coworkers, and even some people who are lucky enough to meet him for the first time tonight. Regardless of how you know him, it is a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you to celebrate the achievements of my dad. When I think about sports broadcasting, the first thing that comes to my mind is storytelling. You need to be an excellent storyteller in order to make it in this business. Capturing an audience via a TV screen is not a simple task, no matter how easy my dad makes it seem. Looking back, I like to think that my dad would practice storytelling on me when I was younger. Every night, I would ask him for a unique bedtime story, one that did not come from any children's book. My dad would then outline 3 options of different stories and let me pick which one that I wanted to hear. I would do my best to keep him on his toes, continually interrupting to ask questions about this character or that plot twist. These skills he refined during our time together at bedtime would come in handy when he was on the air and there was an unexpected turnover on the football field, or when someone hit the game-winning shot on the basketball court. There were many nights as a child that I fell asleep listening to my dad's voice during story time, something that I'm sure a number of people here can relate to when it comes to listening to his golf commentary. Another key to being successful in the sports broadcasting business is having the keen ability to connect personally with everyone you come into contact with. It's not just about memorizing statistics, but about building relationships with the individuals on the field and personalizing your broadcast in such a way that it allows the audience to get a peek into the lives of the players. I'm sure many guests here tonight can agree that my dad is not only the kind of person who seems to know everyone when he walks into a room, but he's also someone who won't shy away from talking your ear off about the current NFL playoff picture or hesitate sharing the latest achievements of his 3 children. His passion for genuinely getting to know everyone in his life is something that I've tried to mirror in my own. In closing, I personally want to say how proud I am of you. I'm honored to be one of your presenters tonight, and I can't wait to see you at YouTube in the future. Cheers to you.
Now to introduce Jim Nantz, the chairman of CBS Sports, and a man that knows a little bit of something about this organization. His father, Jim McKay, was inducted into this Hall of Fame in 1987. Sean McManus.
Thank you and good evening. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Jim's professional accomplishments. We all know that there is nobody better when it comes to calling NFL football or golf or college basketball. He's an amazing writer and host and makes everybody in front of and behind the camera with whom he works that much better. He's won the National Sportscaster of the Year 5 times. He has dozens of signature calls on some of the biggest sports events of our time. But quite frankly, I'd rather talk about the fact that as good a broadcaster as Jim is, he's an even better son, father, husband, brother, and friend. And these are roles that mean much more to Jim than his professional roles. I was lucky enough to be asked by Jim to present his award for the 1999 Sportscaster of the Year. And I told my father, who you all know is Jim McKay, that I was going to present the award, and he said, do you think it would be appropriate for me to write a letter to Jim that you could read to everybody? And 21 years ago, I read this letter, which I'm going to read again because it means a lot to Jim Nantz, and it means a lot, obviously, to me. Dear Jim, I'm not sure who got the most out of our game of golf at the Connecticut Golf Club all those years ago, you or I. In my memory book, it has the mystical quality of golf in the kingdom, and although I certainly don't pretend to have the wisdom of great Chivas Irons, it meant a lot to both of us. What made you ask your college friend, then an assistant pro at our course, to ask me if we could have a round together, I can't imagine. As I recall, you were then doing weekend sports in Dallas, but somehow made your way to Connecticut and were waiting for me on the first tee when I arrived in the early morning. You must have known that we shared the same views on so many things. Certainly, I didn't until we were walking the fairways on that beautiful morning, talking about the old course, Bobby Jones, Henry Longhurst, and golf on television, and many other things. It has been said so often and so truly that you can learn a lot about a man in 18 holes of golf, and I certainly learned plenty about you. I learned very quickly and clearly that you are a very decent and kind person, as well as being a hell of a lot better golfer than I am. I was fascinated that our ideas about how sports should be covered on TV were so similar, and that our priorities in life were much the same. We parted with a handshake, and I felt sure that you would make it in life and in your profession. I didn't know just how spectacularly you would succeed. You know so well that TV is a personal medium that you are, in a real sense, describing the event to a friend. You know that it isn't necessarily necessary or desirable to shout in order to convey the emotion of the moment. You know that it isn't statistics, but the human beings that give sports whatever importance they have in society. You know that on occasion it is necessary to use a four-syllable word to convey the precise meaning of something, but you also know that much more often a one-syllable word will do the job. You know that the focus should be on the competitors, not the commentator. You know that it gives you an extra dimension when you write your own words. Above all, I think you understand the X-ray quality of television, that your only best chance in this medium is to be honest. The camera spots a phony every time. There must be a destiny guiding our relationship with you and our family, that you and our son Sean should be working together so closely, and that you should go out of your way to attend our important family occasions is a source of great pleasure to Margaret and me. You and Sean are similar guys. You deserve to be colleagues, and I say that as a high compliment to both of you. Now, how about another round of golf one day this summer, only this time we'll invite Sean and our grandson James to make it a three-generation day. And I wanted to read that letter because I think those words and those meanings are every bit as poignant and as wonderful today as they were 21 years ago. So I bring you my friend, my colleague, the voice of CBS Sports. There's nobody better, Jim Nantz.
Hello, friends. Hang in there. This is a special night. That letter from Jim McKay was hard to imagine 21 years ago, and now I hear it for a second time, and the words even mean more. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for that. His dad was a hero to many Americans, millions of Americans. Touched me deeply. I wrote him letters as a kid. September the 24th of this year, he would have been 100 years old. Where does the time go? I looked at this program tonight, and I heard these speeches, and to hear Bill Nack and Skip Caray and all the ones that have been remembered here tonight, Dick Young, I mean, all of them, I was just shocked that they weren't in the Hall of Fame already, right? I mean, every single one of them were giants. And I grieve for the fact that they didn't get to stand here like I do tonight, to be able to be showered with an evening like this, surrounded by people who they love and love them right back. Can you imagine how big a deal that is when your daughter presents you into the Hall of Fame? I mean, that is one of the, right there, top moments of my life. I mean, when it's all said and done, I'm going to look back. That right there will be one of those lasting memories. It'll be truly one of the highlights of a life that's been blessed in so many ways. So that you know how full circle it comes. When I won that award and Sean presented me in May of 2000 in Salisbury. God bless the people of Salisbury, what they did for this organization for so many years. God bless them all. Thank you, Dave, what you do, I had some young folks today ask me about the importance of the NSMA. We've got to get that word out. I mean, this is ours for all of us in sports media. And those that we have been so fortunate to follow in the footsteps, starting with Grantland Rice, I think was the first one to ever be honored. I mean, we owe it to them to keep those memories alive. But that first time Sean presented me, my father was already deep in the throes of Alzheimer's. My family's from North Carolina. Salisbury was just right down the road from where my grandfather ran a train station in Spencer. There was a lot of heavy stuff in the air. My family grappled with whether my dad would be able to kind of hang in there that night. Would it be appropriate to have him here? You never know exactly what might happen. So we felt like we had full court coverage. We put him at a table. I had my brother-in-law, my sister, my mom, and certainly nothing could go wrong. And I could just see my father's pride. He seldom spoke at that point in his life, and I'm sure he had no idea of exactly what was happening that evening for his boy. But as I stood, as I do right now, and began to talk, he just randomly stood up, unintroduced. And I was struck with a bit of panic. I didn't know what was going to happen next. If you've ever had a loved one, and I hope you haven't, but if it's ever hit your family, you know sometimes you don't know what the behavioral patterns are going to be. And I truly, my heart skipped a beat, and I looked at him. He was sitting basically in the same general area I am tonight, sitting, and I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my father, the real Jim Nantz." And he waved, just very pridefully, and he sat back down. But I was so touched and so moved by it that I really could not get the words out. And it was about that time. There was a little 5-year-old girl in a yellow chiffon dress named Caroline who saw that her father was struggling. And she made her way through the tables, weaving through all the chairs, and she ran up into my arms. And I finished my speech for the National Sportscaster of the Year Award with my 5-year-old daughter, Caroline, in my arms. And tonight she got to present me along with Sean into the Hall of Fame. So I love full circle stories. We are in the storytelling business. I look over here and see Bob Ryan, Bill Roden. Tom, congratulations to you. Rick, I mean, I don't get to know you guys real well, but I do know you. Dick Stockton was an old colleague. Man, are you good. That voice of yours, one of the best of all time. I got a lot of people here tonight that I love dearly, and I know they love me right back, and I'm grateful for that. All I ever wanted to do this evening was get to the point where my 2 youngest would actually still be awake when I took the stage. Then my oldest tells me not to put people to sleep when I call golf tournaments. My little boy over here, you can count on it. 7:15 Central Time, we're past that right now. It's lights out. This last 30 minutes has been like 30 truly important minutes of my life thinking, he's got to see this. I mean, he's 5, but you made it, Jameson, and now Jameson Nantz for birdie over at 16. You can go to sleep now, son. I have another little girl over here who's begged me for 2 weeks to please, please, Daddy, don't introduce me. Please. She's asked me 20 times today, "You're not going to introduce me, are you?" Can I? Can I, Finley? Can I? All right, I won't. I'm going to respect your wishes. But that's my life right there. And my wife, Courtney. And I've heard all these testimonials from family members tonight. We do have a life outside of being storytellers to the world. We've all been hugely blessed to be in the arena, to be able to see these things unfold, try to tell people what it is that we see. But when you come back home, that is the ultimate legacy for all of us. Dick Young had 8 kids. How about that? I love Dick Young. Young ideas. Just amazing. Amazing to hear. Kaywood Ledford, Bill King. I grew up in the Bay Area a little bit as a kid, and when I was a student at the University of Houston, I did stats for Bill King when he came through with the Warriors, when they took on the Rockets. I've got some collaborators who are here tonight, two in particular, Tom Spencer, who's from the Bay Area, has been with me for 30 years. I've been by his side, making me sound at times smarter than I am. I mean, all the time, let's be honest. And he was a huge Bill King fan, and that introduction for Mr. King was wonderful. You did some great justice with that presentation. Tommy, thank you. Melissa Miller's already been introduced tonight. She just marked this month 20 years. She's been the chief of staff. It sounds like a big deal, doesn't it? But she is such a star, and everybody knows she's a direct reflection of everything that I want to stand for. I want to stand for what she stands for, let's put it that way. But Sean, thank you. Thank you. Our families, your dad hoped for that 21 years ago, and I think it's all kind of held true. His dad passed away June 7th, 2008. My dad died 3 weeks to the day later, June 28th, 2008. I got to be a eulogist and a pallbearer at his funeral. I got to attend his last show for ABC Sports in 2000 at the Open Championship. We weren't broadcasting it, but I wanted to be there. I wrote him letters as a kid, and he wrote me back. So I'm going to go over to St. Andrews to the Open Championship, and I reached out in advance and said, would you mind if I came over? I want to walk you to the tower for the last time. He said, okay, yeah, if you want to do that, come on over. So I did. I flew to St. Andrews to walk across the 1st and 18th fairways and take him to the ABC Tower. And an hour before that, I met him at the hotel, the Rusacks Hotel on the 18th fairway. And it was in that room where I looked at a man whose very life I wanted to live. He was 79 years old, and this was the last road trip, and he missed his wife, Margaret, so much. He had tears in his eyes. There was an open bottle of red wine, cork put back in, that was sitting in the windowsill. Room was maybe 10 by 12 feet. I had imagined that Jim McKay was in the presidential suite, this giant icon of my life. And we sat there and talked about how he had brought the world to all of us, made the world smaller. Today, everybody's connected, but back then we weren't. The Olympics brought the world to us all, and Jim McKay was our storyteller and our tour guide. And he said, you know, he always imparted advice to me, but he said, Jimmy, when you look into that camera, he said, always think of someone on the other side. You can't think about there are millions of people on the other side. Think of one person and talk to that person. And I tried to do that. I couldn't quite relate to it. A couple years later, my dad's condition had worsened, and I was at his side at his facility. He was in a nursing facility in Houston, getting ready to go off to an event in Minneapolis. And I said, Dad, when I come on the air this weekend, I'm going to look into the camera, and I'm going to send you a message. I want you to know this. I'm thinking of you. I'm going to say hello, friends. I know it sounds a little cheesy, but that's for you. That is, I'm going to say it this time, and when you hear it, I want you to know I'm thinking of you when I say that. So I did. On the Saturday of the PGA Championship, 02 Hazeltine, got off the air, and a great friend of mine, Eli Spielman, said, I heard you say hello, friends. What was that about? And I told him the story. He said, you know, that sounds like you. You ought to do that tomorrow. You ought to do that all the time. And I have every show since. I get a lot of people come and say, hey, what's this hello friends all about? Like, well, you know, are you trying to make some sort of, I guess I'm assuming they think I'm trying to make something out of it. Truly, what it was born out of was just a way to try to connect with my dad. I'm sure by the time I said it a day or two after I had told him I was going to do it, that he had long forgotten it, but I did it, and I felt like I was connected with him. And I feel like every time I look in that lens now, just like Mr. McKay told me, I'm talking to someone. And he's been gone 13 years, but when I say hello, friends, as I did yesterday in Tampa, I see my dad on the other side of that lens that doesn't give you any feedback. So, it's been an amazing journey. I'm not going to kid you. It's a childhood dream come true. And I don't know what we've all done. I'm sure every one of you that are going to stand up here on this stage tonight, deep in your heart, you know the same thing. How do we get so fortunate to do this? We worked hard. There's no denying. We tried to perfect our craft. But when it's all said and done, we have traveled. We've met fascinating people. We've had the life. And if we're especially lucky, we've come back home to an amazing, loving family. And that's my story. And I just can't thank you enough. All I ever wanted to do was work for CBS Sports since I was 11 years old. That's it. I told everyone in high school, I'm going to work for CBS one day. I'm going to broadcast the Masters. I'm going to put people to sleep when I talk about golf. Sean, David, Burson, Sandy, Montag, you guys have been there a long time, backing me up. Thank you. All my friends and family. God bless you for lifting me on your shoulders and always supporting me. Always. All of you. It's been a ton. I sometimes wish I had more time with every one of you. Our lives are busy. You're running off to the next thing to do. But all I know is my heart's never been filled with more gratitude. And it's so heavy with gratitude. May I take that plaque off the stage tonight? Are you guys planning on, it's already gone? Where is it? Can you bring it over here real quick? I can vamp for like a minute. I can. Bring it on over here. I'm taking it with me. I don't want anyone. I'll bring it back over there, and I'm going to take it home. You don't have to ship it. I'm going to save the organization some money. I'm going to carry it with me. But I know this. It is heavy. This piece is a piece of granite. And my heart is so heavy, filled with joy. Somebody used the word joy tonight. Was it you, Josh? God, that was beautiful what you said about your dad. It was really beautiful. So, because I'm feeling heavy-hearted at the moment, I'm going to ask, will my 3 kids help me carry this off the stage? I just want some full symmetry from 2000. Nobody's going to be introduced. This is just a matter of helping Dad carry something that's a little heavy for him right now. If my little boy's still awake, you can handle it on your own. Come on, J-Mo, you can do it. Let me see. Oh my gosh. Tom, I want to see you lift this later on. Caroline, come on up. Caroline will make it just about full circle 2000. How great was my daughter, tonight? Did she do it or what? Thank you to this amazing organization. Thank you, the NSMA, and thank you to my colleagues at CBS. I love them all. I get to work with people like James Brown, Greg Gumbel, Tony Romo, Tracy, Raft, Grant Hill, my golf crew. Man, it doesn't get any better than this. God bless you all. Thank you for one of the great nights of my life.
How about my man Mike running over there and grabbing that thing and making like Thor. Totally impressed. Well, and Jim, listen, at the end of the day, we all know this, as storytellers, sports are about how we experience it. Yeah, I told y'all. Mike, table 5, stat. But this is about family, and it's about how we experience the moments. It's about how we watch television with our family, watching Superstation as a kid. It's about how you hear it on the radio, and it's about those families that make those sacrifices so that we can be in this business, because as we all know, it's awfully hard. My wife is texting me right now wanting to know how it's going because I left her at home. So Thank you to all the families. My favorite English teacher in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, knew that I wanted to be a sports writer. And he would walk into class, Mr. McIntyre, and he would have an article he had ripped out of Sports Illustrated. And he would throw it down on my desk and he would say, if you want to write, you need to write like Rick Telander. I go, thank you. And a couple of days later, he'd come in with another story. I'm telling you, this Telander is the man. I go, thank you, Mr. McIntyre. And a couple years later, Rick had a fantastic television show where he did these in-depth sit-down interviews, and they introduced him, and I was sitting with a friend of mine, and it was not Rick Telander. It was Telander, and my buddy sat up and he said, who is going to call Mr. McIntyre and tell him he was getting that wrong? And I said, I am not. But it is an honor to introduce Mr. Telander as our latest inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame, and to introduce him as his son, Zachary.
Hey everybody, my name is Zach Telander. I am the cooler version of that old guy sitting over there. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and I'm the only boy. And Jim, if he's still in here, to answer your question, my dad will not find out what it's like to have his daughter present him into the Hall of Fame. He chose his favorite son. Professionally, I'm a coach and content creator for a niche sport called Olympic weightlifting. So in essence, I'm following in my father's footsteps, just in a sport that no one cares about. In the sport of Olympic weightlifting, there's a very well-known champion named Pyrrhos Dimas. I'm sure some of you in this room covered the Barcelona, Atlanta, Australia, and Athens Olympics, wherein Dimas finished with 3 golds and a bronze, respectively. And I remember talking with one of my colleagues, another weightlifting coach, about Pyrrhos, because Pyrrhos is now the head coach of the United States weightlifting team. And for some reason, we were talking about these hyper winners and how they are with their families and their personal friends. And one of the things we brought up was how they were with their kids. And my friend said to me, or my colleague said to me, do you think that Pyrrhos' kids cared about his gold medals, cared about how good of a weightlifter he was? And I had to think for a little bit, and he interrupted me and he said, no, they just wanted a good dad. And as the son of someone who's getting inducted into the Sports Writers Hall of Fame today, I can unequivocally agree with that sentiment. You all are here to recognize my father as the brilliant writer he was and still is, but I just don't care. And that's not a bad thing, because for me, he's done more than enough as my father. We live next to Hallis Hall, the practice facilities for the Chicago Bears. And Dad, this was a very convenient spot to be a sports writer. And I wasn't alive yet, but oftentimes some of the Chicago Bears would come over and sit on our deck for interviews, most notably Walter Payton. That's all great, but for me, Hallis Hall was my practice facility. That was where my dad and I would do batting practice, throw the football endlessly, day in and day out. There was one time when the cicadas came, and for those of you who don't know what cicadas are, they are these weird bugs that show up every 17 years, spend most of their lives underground, come above ground and fly, and then they die. So that's a new factoid that you can take with you, whatever. But one day he was pitching batting practice for me, and he reached into the bucket and said, here we go, we have one more pitch. And sure enough, he threw a cicada at me. Sure enough, I launched that bastard into orbit. This was almost an everyday thing with my father, and I kid you not, at any time he was home, he would stop and do anything he could to practice baseball, football, just run around with me. My dad had so many opportunities to be a hotshot talking head on a mainstream television show, and every time he would deny them. He valued writing. And slowly but surely, the art and importance of writing a column has dissipated, and we are left with a media gap that he could have filled, but he never did. The days of seeing everyone with their heads down to read the paper have been replaced with heads down to read a tweet or look at highlights on their phone. But thankfully to the NSMA, my father can be remembered for his work as a writer, and hopefully after this speech, you all can remember him as something more important to myself, a great father. I am so incredibly honored to be able to recognize this man for his work as a writer and as a father. I present to you Rick Telander.
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Zach. And I see Caroline and Jim Nantz are gone, and didn't mean to one-up him with the son. Over. He does have 3 older sisters, and just an informational thing, so does Tom Brady. Take that for what it's worth. I want to thank, I need to do this, and I'm going to be pretty quick because these things can get old. Well, I thank Dave Goren tremendously. Dave, and you look great in a tuxedo, even if you break it out once a year, which is what I heard. The NSMA, thank you. The city of Winston-Salem, been great. All those volunteers, all those kids, and there's one kid, I don't know, the kid from the radio station, student radio station, is he back there? I don't know, he was here. That kid's gonna be something because he's got that velvet glove kind of thing, like he was talking to Bill Roden and me, and I think I don't know if we were talking with Bob. I see Dan over there, but he's like, can you just come up, get a big smile, can you come up here, we doing personal interviews. I didn't know who he was, so we got up there and we stood in line, you know? So anyway, wherever that kid is that you back there? Yeah, there you are. Well, just stand up, just so people can recognize you right now. Yeah. Yep. Okay, you're gonna make it, just sit down. Jeez. You know, last night you honored Neil Leifer. I've worked with Neil Leifer, the great photographer, and it was so fabulous just to see him. I know that, I don't know, Tom, if you have Tom Verducci, and I don't know how many of you other guys have ever worked with Neil, but he had a competition with Walter Yost, and it's spelled Iooss, I think. So nobody ever pronounced his name. Talk about my name, Telander or whatever. Walter Yost was the other great photographer for Sports Illustrated. One of his assignments was doing the bathing suit issue quite often. But these two guys could not have been more dissimilar. You heard Neil's story, you know, the kid, the poor kid from the Lower East Side of New York, and I don't know where, you know, I don't know that much backstories about all these guys, but the other one, I remember him showing up, Walter, with a story we were doing, he was wearing, and I think I've told this, he was wearing like cut-up jean shorts, he had a shirt open down to here with like a chain on, and he had mirror glasses on, he had a beard, kind of a beard, and he was wearing sandals. Now, imagine that with Neil Leifer, and those are the two great photographers, to show you how you can be anything and make it into whatever you want if you put your mind to it, because they both work so hard. The one thing I wanted to say about writing, because I got into writing, I thought back an awful lot. Why did you want to do this? What was your impetus for it? And it started when I was a kid, because we read all the time. My family, we weren't allowed to watch TV very much. And frankly, when I was a kid, TV sucked anyway. If I never see Leave It to Beaver again, and Zach and I used to do a little routine. You could have told him that. I'd say, you know, Wal, those girls are funny. Yeah, Beav. He'd be one of the other. Yeah, Beav, they are. So, you know, Wal, what? Can you tell me anything about them? Well, Beav, it's complicated. Well, Beav, you know, and Wally'd say, Beav, why don't we go down and to the kitchen? I bet Mom has some lemonade and chocolate chip cookies out. That was a typical Leave It to Beaver thing. And I'm thinking, where on earth does this exist? So it was not hard not to watch TV. But reading is what we did, and I realized very early on that reading was the flip side of the coin that's called writing. And if you want to be a writer, I didn't think that I ever could be. I never told anybody. I was never a journalism major. I went to Northwestern. I was an English literature major. I wanted to read because I thought maybe I can learn enough somehow and eventually learn how to do what these people do. And there was a book, my mom took me to the Peoria Public Library. By the way, Chick Hearn, Dick King, and Jack Brickhouse, all from Peoria. I mean, that's pretty stunning. So is Richard Pryor. So it's a little variety there. We would go to the library, and I couldn't wait to go, even though I'd have to be dragged in off a field where I was playing or whatever. But once I got there, I loved it. And I remember there was this book, and it came to me about a year ago. And I'm talking 65 years later, because I think it was like 64, whatever, 72 now. I was a little kid, and there was this book, and it was called Slim Green. And I thought, light bulb went off. That was a book that fascinated me, and it was about a baby snake. And it wasn't written in verse, and it wasn't written for little kids. It was written probably at 5th grade level. And I could read pretty well early on. And I got that book, and because of where I grew up in Peoria, out where the woods were, and the streams and fields and all that, and gullies and ravines, and the Illinois River a mile off, but you could get lost in these woods. My buddies and I were always playing in the woods, and we really knew a lot about nature. We had bug collections and butterfly collections and pet lizards and turtles and frogs and toads and salamanders, and we even kept bumblebees as pets. You could take a bumblebee and put it on a thread, because bumblebees are a lot less harmful than you might think. They never sting you. And you could fly them around and put them back in your box. We did stuff like that. So this book, Slim Green, was about this snake. I knew about snakes because we would see them, and occasionally we'd catch them. And one time I brought one home, and I kept it as a pet, because they had all these other pets, and that was the one thing where I kind of crossed the line with my mom. It was like, that's no more. We had the gerbils, the hamsters, the white mice, and that was it, because it got loose one time. And my mom told me this story. She said, Rick, women don't like snakes because of Adam and Eve and the snake on that tree. I said, oh, okay, okay, Mom. So anyway, that was the end of the snakes. But this book, Slim Green, to get back to the internet that Zach brought up, that has pretty much made my profession of writing for an actual physical newspaper somewhat irrelevant. I was at O'Hare the other day, or coming here, I couldn't even find a newspaper to buy. It's all online, I understand that. But this book, I thought, God, that's the name of it. Maybe I can find it. And by God, I found it on the internet. I bought it at some, I don't know, somebody, it had a library card still in it. They sent it to me, and I had this deja vu feeling, like you can't imagine. It was like having a moment recreated when your whole life changed. And I still have that book. I actually even brought it with me. I was looking at it the other day. So it's little moments like that that I think all of us cling to. And when people would say to me, well, you know, sports writing, isn't sports kind of the toy department? I mean, that's what they used to talk about. That was a cliche for the newspapers. And I actually was thinking about that today. And if you think that the integration of sports and society to some degree with Jackie Robinson, if you think that the Nazism being introduced, 36 Olympics with Adolf Hitler, and the response from Jesse Owens, if you think that the, matter of fact, you know what? I've got this written down. I got to bring up my, sorry, I got to bring glasses out. Labor relations, Lou Brock. Unions, with all the union deals, and how you feel about labor and capitalism in general. St. Louis Cardinals and other teams, the way that we've seen that change. If you think you've learned about cartels and monopolies, you need to learn about something like maybe, the NCAA or the NFL. Ask yourselves about the USFL, and the USFL actually won an antitrust suit against the NFL, and they won $1, and that's kind of legendary. That shows how you can win. That would taught you an awful lot about the legal system, where you could get it reflected in that regard. The Cold War, Miracle on Ice. Think of that. The amateur team from the United States beating the professional team from the Soviet Union. Apartheid in South Africa with rugby teams and boycotting in the Olympics. We even had things, obviously, cheating. Rosie Ruiz in the 1980 Boston Marathon, where she took a subway for 25 miles. It's assumed she did not mean to finish first. She mistakenly got ahead of everybody, and I believe she wanted to finish like 14th or something. We're doing a lot better. Steroids and doping. And then, of course, bring it all the way to current times, Black Lives Matter. Who else do you think of more as spearheading that than Colin Kaepernick, whatever you may think about him with the San Francisco 49ers? So I never felt that writing about sports was anywhere near the toy department. What I felt it was writing and using the English language, which I often compare to an artist with a palette. All these different colors. And for what I understand about different languages, the English language is more colorful and has more words, more descriptive words than almost any other language anywhere. And I know that great writers like Nabokov and Joseph Conrad wrote in English rather than in Polish or in Russian because it was more descriptive. I can't speak those other languages, I don't know. But you're an artist, you're holding this brush, and you've got this palette here, and it goes, the color wheel from red to orange to yellow to green to blue, purple, the rainbow, all those things you see. And you start to think of the variety in between every single color. And then you have this over here that you want to describe, interpret using these paints. And then you reach the point that a lot of us writers do, and I think I was talking with Bill Roden about it tonight, where it's like, oh my God, what do I do? And when you have writer's block, oh baby, you don't know what to do because there are too many colors, too many options. But when you finally can get past that and you use those colors, then you're painting. I think there's such a similarity between music, between broadcasting, speaking well, between writing, between painting, any artistic endeavor you can think of. And even ones that may seem only business oriented, they all have an artistic element to it. And I do believe that there's something deep inside of every one of us that wants to express ourselves, to be creative, and wants to somehow be able to figure our own selves out. Because I know that's what we're all doing. What are we doing here on this earth? Who are we? I thought, well, you know what? Writing's going to help me get there someday, maybe. And each athlete that I would interview, and I could go on and on like any of us could, us old boys, the people from my time with Bear Bryant, with Joe Namath, with Walter Payton, loved Walter Payton, with Mike Ditka, with Joe Montana, just goes on and on and on with Roger Maris. Really liked Roger Maris. I got a great photo. I didn't take photos very often with athletes. I happened to have a camera, and it was me, Roger Maris, Mickey Mantle, and Billy Martin, the four of us in a bar in a Holiday Inn in Gainesville. It sounds like the setup to a joke, I know, but it was a true story. Anyway, I got one photo, and I know Zach, my beloved son, has seen that one, and Roger was everything that I thought he wouldn't be, and nothing that I thought he would be. I could go on and on with those stories like that, but in each one of those people, Michael Jordan, spent a lot of time with Michael, and I don't know if Harvey Smith is still here, but I met him. Harvey's way back there. A great meet this weekend because he's a guy from Laney High School that started Michael on his career, that made Michael who he is, because he started as a sophomore in high school and Michael didn't, on the basketball team. You wonder why Michael's so bitter and nasty and wins so many championships? Thank you, Harvey. Stand up. Come on. Listen. Come on. Yeah. Uh-huh. True story. So it's a journey of self-discovery, all of this. Winning this award is very meaningful to me. Seeing so many friends I'd love to talk to, so many guys, is just terrific. I have to say it's bittersweet in that it means it's an award for a long career. It also means, yeah, you've gotten old, and it's like, damn, where did the time go? And I don't know. I'm not done yet, but I will keep going a little bit longer, as long as I can, because I can't think of anything else that I can do. And I just want to thank everybody again, and the voters, and thank you, NSMA.
Yeah, he gave me permission to call him a high school teacher and tell him it's Telander. A lot of times when I'm emceeing this event, and such an honor it is, I have to do a lot of research on people before they win an award or before they're inducted into the Hall of Fame. The next person is not one of those people. Nicole Auerbach has become a great friend. What she has accomplished in a relatively short period of time in this industry is remarkable by any measure. I'm honored to call her a friend, particularly seeing what she's done during this most difficult time of our industry or any industry, between the pandemic and between the sports, what Mr. Telander was talking about, its role when it comes to social justice. I'm honored to say that Nicole Auerbach is our NSMA National Sportswriter of the Year for 2020. Come on up here.
Thank you, everyone, and just a total honor to share the stage with everyone who's speaking tonight. I'm deeply honored to be the recipient of the 2020 National Sportswriter of the Year Award. I kind of blocked out most of that year, which I think we all did in some ways, but I take great pride in the fact that you've recognized me for my work in actual unprecedented times. A lot of sports writers chose to pretend that we weren't living and working in a pandemic, because their audiences didn't like to read it. They didn't want to hear about the possibility that their favorite team may not actually play. I felt a personal and professional responsibility to report on the virus, the finances it impacted, actual health and safety protocols, everything. I felt a responsibility to accurately document the biggest story of our lifetimes and its impact on college sports and colleges as a whole. It was not easy, it was not fun, but I can tell you now that I was not rooting for the virus, despite what my hate readers would tell you. I kept reporting and breaking news and explaining what was happening. I'd have loved to be on this stage and accept this award because I wrote some heartwarming features that everybody just loved, which I will do at some point, but that's not what got me here. I am so proud that it was the hard stuff that got me here. A lot of people in our industry don't like to cover hard news or write critical pieces, but I am not wired that way. For that, I would like to thank my parents, Mike and Lisa, for letting me be as stubborn and confrontational as I needed to be as a child. And thank you for instilling in me your love of sports and community and communication. And thanks for paying for that weekly Sports Illustrated subscription. I also want to thank every editor who pushed me to become a better reporter, like Dan Uthman did when he forced me at age 22 at USA Today to cold call coaches and athletic directors when I was worried that I was going to be bugging them. I want to thank Joe Sullivan at the Boston Globe, who made me believe that I had a voice that was different and worth listening to. I want to thank Matthew Osborne at the Trentonian and Bill Higgins at the Cape Cod Times, who fought for me to be treated fairly and given equal access when I was a young woman in a male-dominated field and just an intern. I am grateful to every woman who has worked in sports media before me for knowing that you're never just representing yourself and that you have to be twice as good to be taken half as seriously. I am so grateful for my friends and colleagues who motivate me and keep me sane. Thank you all. And thank you to the National Sports Media Association for this incredible honor.
And I failed to mention this in the introduction, but I'm also happy to say that Nicole has joined us on the board over the last year of the NSMA in our continuing efforts to diversify, to make the room look a little different, and to make sure that it grows at the rate that we believe that it should. With that being said, this room is full of so many talented sports writers, the best that each of your states has to offer as it was voted. And this is one of my favorite parts of the night, as I like to call it, the March of the Sports Writers. And to handle that, it's the great Doug Logan.
Would all the state-winning sports writers please assemble to this side of the stage? We will go by state. So thank you very much, Ryan. And on behalf of our state winners, heartiest congratulations to our national honorees and a special salute to our Hall of Fame inductees. Will Hall of Fame inductee Tom Verducci please join me on stage? And there he is. You know, given all the challenges that we're facing these days, the National Sports Media Association is very proud to have 46 state honorees on hand, representing 28 states with a remarkable 21 first-time winners. We have 4 individuals with us this evening who will be collecting awards for both 2019 and 2020. Are we ready? Let's meet our 2019 and/or 2020 NSMA State Sports Writers of the Year. From Arizona, 8 years representing the Arizona Daily Star. She covers investigations while writing enterprise stories and long-form features, with the bulk of her work covering the Arizona Wildcats. First honor for Caitlin Schmidt. From Arkansas, newly named managing editor of the hogbeat.com, the site in the Rivals Network, he covered the Razorbacks for 10 years, highlighting football, men's basketball, and baseball. First win, Andrew Hutchinson. From Connecticut, 14 years with Hearst Connecticut Media. He spent a dozen seasons as beat writer for the Yukon Huskies in basketball. He also covered Yale's trip to the 2019 NCAA tournament. First recognition for David Borges. From Connecticut, he joined the Hearst Connecticut Media in 2017 after a long stint with the New Haven Register. He's in his 28th year covering high school sports as well as the PGA Tour's Travelers Championship. First win for Joe Morelli. From the District of Columbia, 18 years with the Washington Post, where he has been a sports columnist since 2016. He chronicled the Houston Astros sign stealing and the World Series champion Washington Nationals, as well as a neutral site World Series and a November Masters. Fourth honor for Barry Sverluga. From Georgia, after 32 years with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, he's looking to retire in 22. He says his memory is fading, but he seems to remember covering Tiger Woods winning a Masters and vaguely recollects being able to talk to athletes in a locker room. 11th win for Steve Hummer. From Georgia, general sports columnist and senior writer for The Athletic, he wrote columns on the Braves' run to their first World Series title in 26 years, the unexpected rise of the Hawks, and the unraveling of the Falcons and their relationship with Julio Jones. Fifth recognition, Jeff Schultz. From Louisiana, a feature writer and columnist covering the New Orleans Saints and Pelicans for the Crescent City Sports. He also focuses on LSU sports for Saturday Down South. In his spare time, he contributes to The Advocate and NOLA.com. Second recognition, Les East. From Louisiana, 42 years at the Lake Charles American Press, he says that throughout the COVID lockdown, he had to BS his way through a lot of his columns, but he also pitched in with many human interest stories in the wake of the hurricanes Laura and Dixie. Second honor for Scooter Hobbs, if he were here. From Maryland, 22 years with the Carroll County Times in Westminster. He served 15 years as the high school beat writer before the sports editor covering pro sports. He presently fills the role of sports editor and reporter at the Community Media Center of Carroll County. First win, Pat Stetzer. From Maryland, recently retired after 42 years as a sports journalist. He first covered the LA Dodgers and California Angels for the Orange County Register, then moved east for 3 decades as a baseball reporter at the Baltimore Sun. Seventh award, Peter Schmuck. From Massachusetts, he's worked at the Boston Globe since 1981 and has written a sports column there since '88. He just completed his 13th book, Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. A winner of the Baseball Writers Association Career Excellence Award in Cooperstown, 14th honor, Dan Shaughnessy. From Michigan, this is his 52nd year covering primarily high school athletics for the Detroit Free Press. He's helped introduce the world to Irvin Johnson, Derek Jeter, Jerome Bettis, Antonio Gates, and now Antonio Gates Jr. Second win for Mick McCabe. From North Carolina, both 2019 and 20, just retired as a sports columnist after 30 years with the Greensboro News and Record and 10 years before that at the Winston-Salem Journal. He's an avid fisherman. Now he's covered 35 straight ACC tournaments, 30 Daytona 500s, and 20 Masters tournaments. Fourth and fifth honors for Ed Hardin. From Ohio, in his 4th year covering the University of Cincinnati football and men's basketball for The Athletic, including this season's impressive Bearcats run to the college football playoff. First win, Justin Williams. From South Carolina, sports columnist and college sports editor at the Charleston Post and Courier, where he's worked for 35 years. He writes about the SEC and the ACC. 7th honor, Gene Sapikoff. From South Carolina, 3 years working for The Athletic, covering Clemson football. In 2020, she was on the scene following the Tigers to their 6th consecutive appearance in the college football playoff, behind the efforts of quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Please welcome for her 3rd win, Grace Rayner. From West Virginia, 2019 and 20, in his 6th year at Marshall as assistant AD for fan and donor engagement and communications, he oversees the written content on herdzone.com in Thundering Herd Illustrated. 8th and 9th wins for Chuck McGill. It's in the bathroom. Wyoming. In the great year of 2019, he covered University of Wyoming Cowboys athletics for the Casper Star-Tribune. He broke a race relations story from 50 years ago involving athletics from Wyoming and BYU. He's worked for the Clemson Insider since August. 2nd recognition for Davis Potter. Thank you. And Wyoming, he covers the Cowboys athletics for WYO Sports in Laramie. He recently worked on stories examining former University of Wyoming star athletes like Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen and their lasting significance to the school and to the state. First win for Michael Katz. And how about one more big hand for all of our state-winning sports writers?
Congratulations to all. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We've kept y'all in the room for a long time, so this is the time you don't have to sneak out like West Durham. You can run out and powder your nose, and we'll resume in about 10 minutes. All right. If we could, let's have everyone return to our seats, and we will continue with the second act of our evening. As was mentioned earlier, part of the attraction of moving this event from the fantastic town of Salisbury was because of the rich sports history, but particularly sports media history that they have here in Winston-Salem. And chief among that is really the epicenter when it comes to college broadcasting. And that, of course, is Learfield Sports. Every year, we award the Woody Durham Award, again, named after the father of Wes Durham, who cut out earlier. Feel free to remind him of that. I sound like Wes, so it's like he's here. The Woody Durham Award winner, that award is always given to those who have had an outstanding career in college sports broadcasting. And for those of us who grew up particularly in the southeastern United States with a lot of professional sports, those were, the term I used earlier, the soundtrack of our youth. To introduce this year's Woody Durham Award winner, Gene Deckerhoff, is Chris Ferris of Learfield.
Wow. This morning started with me getting in my car and turning on the radio and hearing Gene Deckerhoff calling a Tom Brady touchdown pass to win a football game. So how fitting a day to end for me the same way, and a chance to honor Gene. So 4 years ago, Learfield, the University of North Carolina Department of Athletics, and the NSMA prepared and partnered to create the Woody Durham Voice of College Sports Award. Woody meant so much to UNC and its fans. He was the voice of the program, he truly was. He brought so many great moments to those who could not be there to see them. And as a Tar Heel alum, I can personally attest to being in the stands at Kenan Stadium and turning once every game and chanting Woody's name until he reached out and gave us all the fist bump. So he meant a lot to everybody, and so it's an honor for me to be standing in front of you and honoring somebody that also means a lot to the fans of a college, a university. Those listening on the radio always had a familiar voice to help lead the way, and Woody came from an era, and Gene as well, when television wasn't as prominent. You couldn't get every game on TV, so you had to listen to the radio, and there's an art form in that, and it's appreciated by those of us who grew up listening to sports on the radio and had it painted for us. So the Woody Durham Voice of College Sports Award recipient each year is chosen by a committee who evaluate based on a criteria to include preparation, recognizability with their school, tenure, efforts in the community, mentorship with young broadcasters, and of course, character. This year's recipient has just begun his 48th season calling Florida State men's basketball, and also just completed his 43rd season behind the mic for Florida State football. As the voice of the Seminoles, Gene Deckerhoff is synonymous with the Noles. He was born in Ohio, but since the age 10, he's been in Florida. His radio journey began in 1964, I love this story, after passing the exam required to receive an FCC license, third-class radio operator license. In 1964, you had to do that in order to get on the radio. So that's when it all started. Gene began his association with FSU by splitting basketball play-by-play duties in the winter of 1974 before becoming the full-time basketball voice the next year. In 1976, Gene became the first sports director at WECA-TV in Tallahassee. He moved to WCTV in 1978 and then added Florida State football play-by-play to his portfolio in 1979. Not only did the Seminole fans get to claim Gene as the voice in their memory banks of every great moment in Florida State history over those 48 years, he also brings his passion and skills to pro football on Sundays as well. For the past 33 seasons, Gene has been the play-by-play voice of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he brings those listeners that same eternal connection to the many great Bucks moments like the one that happened yesterday. Gene is one of the few broadcasters that call college games on Saturdays and NFL games on Sundays, and I'm just saying that Gene's wife, Ann, deserves a big shout out for what he must go through and what she must go through in order for him to make that work, especially since he's calling basketball this week probably as well. So some amazing stats to ponder about Gene over this time. 529 Florida State football games in 43 seasons, 1,306 Florida State basketball games, 667 Tampa Bay Bucks football games. Gene is a member of several Halls of Fame. He's been voted 15 times by his peers as the NSMA Florida Sportscaster of the Year. In 2013, he was presented with the Chris Schenkel Award by the National Football Foundation, and in 2015, he was the recipient of the Lindsey Nelson Award by the Knoxville Quarterback Club. It is a great honor to introduce the recipient of the Woody Durham Voice of College Sports Award, Mr. Gene Deckerhoff.
Wow, how about this? Thank you very much, Chris, for that wonderful introduction. And for those of you wanting to know, it's 5:10 in Hawaii. Just thought we mentioned that since it's about 10:10 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Touchdown, FSU! Touchdown, Florida State! That's a wake-up call now. Let's get into it. The broadcasters are coming up next. All right. Chris mentioned my wife, Ann. 56 years, 5 months, and 23 days ago, we married on June the 21st, 1965. When I took this crazy job of doing 2 games on weekends, she's my co-pilot, and we drive to Tampa 4.5 hours every Sunday morning at 6:05 a.m. We arrive at 10:35. I drop Ann off at the team hotel, do the broadcast, and we sometimes have dinner after the game. You know, it's an honor to be recognized by your peers as a broadcaster. We've heard great stories tonight by writers in the Hall of Fame. Jim Nantz's stories up great. He was in Tampa last night with us, and last night the elevator worked. The previous time he broadcast a Bucks game, the elevator did not work. We rode up on the there's Jim. We rode up on the escalator. Remember? Yeah, that's the longest escalator ride I've ever had. Woody Durham was the longtime legendary voice of college sports for the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, I want to tell you how good Woody Durham was, and Jim, there's probably none better than Woody was at doing what he did. You know, Dr. Naismith invented the game of basketball. Carolinians know they perfected it. And Woody Durham was the Michelangelo that painted the word pictures of exciting Tar Heel basketball. And if anybody could do a 2.5-hour broadcast, and the final score was 12-8 in the Dean Smith era of the Four Corners, and say thank you very much for tuning in to this wonderful Tar Heel basketball game. We'll see you again next time. He deserves an award of some kind, and it's named after Woody Durham. To Wes Durham, Taylor Durham, to Woody's widow, Jean, I say I'm deeply honored to be presented with a name honoring the late Woody Durham. For my fellow sports broadcasters in this room tonight, and there are writers that get into the broadcast business too, I say one day you're going to walk up here and receive the Woody Durham Award and be very proud of it. Thank you very much to the committee. Thank you very much for joining us. And it's now 12 minutes after 5 in Hawaii. Go Noles!
Did we purposely put Gene here 3 hours into this thing? Probably. To induct the next member of our NSMA Hall of Fame, the great Dick Stockton, who I don't mean to keep talking about my professors and my teachers, but I had a professor who played your call of Carlton Fisk's home run, and as Fisk ran around the bases, and you said nothing, our professor said, "You see, guys, it's okay to shut the hell up." And I've always remembered that. To introduce the great Dick Stockton, longtime Fox Sports executive Eric Shanks.
evening, everyone. It's great to be here and see all of our colleagues. I want to congratulate one of our colleagues, Tom Verducci, who's going to be going into the Hall of Fame in here just a little bit. Our colleague, Nicole, who you just heard from with a great speech and is going to go great places. But I'm here tonight to introduce and induct my good friend, Dick Stockton. We all know his professional accolades. And I mean, seriously, like, what else was going to happen if it was fair, right, Dick? I mean, what else were you going to say? But to me, Mr. Richard Edward Stockton is more than just a professional acquaintance. And tonight, I think we can focus more on the man than the job, because it was you who said that work is what you do, not who you are. And I respect and admire you deeply for that. It was way back in the 1900s. I was a recent college dropout whose first job at the newly invented Fox Sports was to pick up the legendary Dick Stockton at his apartment in Manhattan and drive him to the first ever NFL game on Fox between the Eagles and the Giants. So I did a dry run the day before. I had never driven in Manhattan, just to make sure that I didn't screw it up. I arrived at the apartment building 15 minutes ahead of time. I walked in and I used the house phone, and I call up to Mr. Stockton's apartment. Hello? Yes, Mr. Stockton, it's Eric Shanks. I'm here and ready when you are. Eric, it's only a story if you're not here. Click. And I hung up and I thought, what the fuck does that mean? But since that time, that very first day, you've meant the world to me. And also to so many others. You've never said no. You've always volunteered to help the next generation of announcers, producers, stupid young executives. You were the commissioner of our fantasy football league. You were the editor of our crew newsletter, singing and playing holiday tunes on the piano and always ready with an impersonation of literally anyone, especially Howard Cosell. You, in my opinion, are a true Renaissance man with no regrets. Except maybe stealing Pat Summerall's stub sandwich off the Madden Cruiser on Thanksgiving in 1997, which John, I talked to him today, he is still pissed about. And I did totally sell you down the river. I honestly can't believe you called it quits. You know that. I was floored the day that you called me and said that you weren't coming back. But you've clearly moved on to better things, traveling around the world with your lovely wife, Jamie. And so now, when I think back to that very first day on the job, I realize exactly what you meant. And it comes full circle. Because, Dick, when it comes to the NSMA Hall of Fame, it's only a story if you're not here. My friend, Dick Stockton.
Good thing I work out twice a week. It's great to be here. You know, kind of Eric gave it away as to why I decided to call it quits. I could have still done games, but when you have a fabulous wife in Jamie, a great partner, and you can travel around the world and go play tennis and golf and do all those things, why work? So that's why I called Eric and decided that I had enough. After 50 years of this business, it was lovely, and I enjoyed it, and it was great, and I have great memories. And Eric, I want to thank you for coming all the way. And what happens when you're CEO, you end up with your leg like that. I know it's not an easy task, but thank you very much. I worked for CBS, as many of you know, for first 23 years of my network life, and I did the Red Sox for 4 years and worked for Turner Sports under the great David Levy. But the last 27 years have been with Fox Sports, and they have been a total joy. And as I've told many people, I wish everyone can work for Fox Sports at some point in their lives, because that's how great it has been, letting you do what you do with the kind of ease that you're allowed to do it. So thank you very much. And thank you to the National Sports Media Association for giving me this honor. You have no idea what it means to me, because I'm blown away by the history of this hall, which I'm aware of, dating back to Salisbury, North Carolina, now here in Winston-Salem. And boy, when you get into a yearbook and your picture is along with John Wayne, you've done something. So it was great. I want to say I'm also proud to have gone in with the other Hall of Fame honorees. You know, and of course, my great friend Jim Nantz, and I was with CBS when Jim came aboard in the mid-'80s and has become a giant of the industry. And to handle 3 major packages the way he does, talking about an announcer who wears well over the years in fabulous form, Jim does that, and a great guy as well. And so I'm proud to go in the same year as Jim Nantz. And Bill King as well, because, you know, I got to know Bill King a bit when I worked for several years as the broadcaster with Ray Fosse, who recently passed away, on the television broadcast there. And of course, Bill King and Lon Simmons did the radio broadcasts. And I regarded Bill as being one of the most erudite sports broadcasters I have ever heard. You know, you don't get here by accident, and you don't have the career you have by accident. And so there are a lot of people that went out on a limb for me. And, you know, they decided to take a chance on an unknown guy. And the first was a gentleman by the name of Win Baker, who invented Eyewitness News for Group W Westinghouse Broadcasting. And he gave me my first television assignment and said to me, do you want to just give scores? You want to just say 1-1 and 3-2, or you want to do more? So he asked me if I wanted to write commentaries that would appear, written commentaries. And this is before the teleprompter, so it wasn't easy with the eye contact. They labeled them commentary, and some of them were controversial, as many of my Boston friends like Bob Ryan and Dan Shaughnessy know from my years at WBZ in Boston. But he was the first to give me an opportunity. The second were the Rooney people, Dan and Art Rooney in Pittsburgh. For some reason, I was 24 years old and working at KDKA in my first major job. And unbeknownst to me, they make a call to Bill McPhail at CBS and say, we have a youngster here that maybe you'd be interested in. And that started my time at CBS doing pre- and post-game football shows on remote, and this was before the days of the NFL Today. And the third gentleman, who's no longer with us, neither is Win Baker, and neither is Art and Dan Rooney, is a fellow by the name of Gene Kirby. Gene Kirby was the assistant general manager of the Boston Red Sox, and before that was the producer of the Game of the Week on radio with Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese. And he called me in the beginning of 1974 and said, have you ever done baseball before? And I said, no, I haven't. He says, well, take a tape recorder, you know, and go to the ballpark and do a game on tape and send it to me, and I'll critique it, see whether you're worth recommending. So I did that and heard from him, and he said, you got a legal pad with you? I said, yes. He says, I'm ready for you. He says, you were not very good. But he didn't use those terms. It was much tougher than that. He pointed out in 8 pages that I wrote down of all the mistakes I made in how I should broadcast the baseball game. And he says, here, go back again with your tape recorder, do it again. And we started in April. We did one in May. We did one in June. He didn't like any of them. And then he said, go back again. He made me go back every month. Until finally in September, he said, I like it. I can now recommend you to work with the Boston Red Sox and the new EUHF station, WSBK, to do 100 games on television. And lo and behold, as luck would have it, or as fortune would have it, just about a year later, I'm in the booth at Fenway Park in the bottom of the 12th inning, and Carlton Fisk comes to the plate and hits that dramatic home run, which meant so much to me. Little did I know at the time, being 32 years old, but it was so important. And so, if it weren't for Gene Kirby, who could have said, this guy just doesn't have it, go back again and again and again, I wouldn't have been in that situation. Being in the right place at the right time. And you know, it's interesting, but I always say that I've done a lot of great sporting events, as many of you know, but it's the people I've worked with that have really counted. My partners have really been impactful. Eric Heiden, for example, one of the great athletes, and I considered maybe the greatest Olympic athlete, having won 5 gold medals in both the sprints and the long distance speed skating, was my partner when we were in Norway in 1994 on CBS, when Dan Jansen finally won the gold medal. It was a dramatic event, and Eric and I spent nearly a month together in Norway, eating salmon one day, venison the next, salmon, venison, salmon, venison, and it went like that for nearly a month. And he was my partner then, and he meant so much to me. And then, of course, Matt Millen, who, when I joined Fox Sports in 1994, Matt Millen was my partner for the first 8 years, and we had a magical team. We loved working together. He was a great guy and a great partner to work with. And years later, Eric decided, let's team you two together once a year, and we did that. And as fortune would have it, my last broadcast of doing football was last year with Matt Millen in a Cleveland-Houston game on Fox. So it meant so much. But it means a lot to me, too, that the print media is represented so well, because when people say, when was it that you wanted to be an announcer? I didn't want to be a broadcaster. I wanted to be a sports writer. And we've heard a lot of that thing, Rick Telander, and that story. Well, my father, we grew up in Queens, New York, would bring home 8 newspapers a day. The Times, the Herald Tribune, the News, the Mirror, the Journal American, the World Telegram and Sun, the New York Post. Oh yes, we subscribed to the Long Island Daily Press. And we bring it out, he'd bring them home, and we would look at the beat writers and compare them and how they treated the same game that they covered, and the columnists and what they did and how they treated things. I was hooked. I wanted to be a sports writer. I went to Syracuse University. Newhouse School wasn't built yet then, and I was a writer. I wanted to write for this Daily Orange, the daily paper, and I did that, and so that was successful. I ended up morphing into broadcasting, and I became, just loving to hear games on the radio and television. In fact, I used to fiddle with the radio to listen to out-of-town games. Kaywood Ledford's name has been mentioned so often tonight. Well, in Queens, New York, I was able to fiddle around with the radio and get to hear Kaywood Ledford do Kentucky basketball every Saturday night. Now, usually when you're in high school, Saturday night, you go to parties and you go on dates, but not me. I was listening to Kentucky basketball, Foster Hewitt doing the Toronto Maple Leafs in hockey, and I remember you get the scratching noise to try to get that 50,000 watt clear channel, and my mother would walk by and say to my father, "Joe, what's wrong with our son?" So the highlights have been the people I've worked with, and I just thought about it the other day. Here I was, a high school kid, watching the great Celtics dynasty, Red Auerbach's teams with Bill Russell, Tommy Heinsohn, and Bob Cousy in the 50s. Would I ever work with these people? And I did. Bill Russell was my first partner on the NBA on CBS. And then it was followed by Tommy Heinsohn. And then Bob Cousy was actually the first partner I ever had when WBZ had 20 Celtic telecasts a year. And I happened to talk to Coos the other day, 93 years old and going strong. And I told him how much I loved him and how much it meant to work with him. I've never seen myself as any kind of a celebrity or performer. People don't pay to see what I do. They didn't know I was coming on the air. Most of the broadcasters who are not from the local area, or in Jim's case, they know he's going to do the Super Bowl. they don't know who's going to do their games. So I never thought of anything other than the fact that on the day of a game, I always think and thought of the guy who worked 9 to 5 and was coming home at night and wanted to watch an NBA game, and I was going to be the guy that he was going to see, or this game on Sunday, the NFL game. He worked 9 to 5 at a 7-Eleven, and now on Sunday he was going to relax before going back to work, and he was going to sit on his couch, have chicken wings, and have a couple of beers and enjoy the game. And all I ever wanted to do was to enhance his experience, make it a little enjoyable for him without getting in the way. And if I could do that, then I succeeded. And that's the way I looked upon all of my broadcasts. So we circle back to retirement, and once again, I'm retired because of Jamie and all the travels we can do and all the activities we can do. I've had a great life, I've had a great career, and I thank the National Sports Media Association for giving me this really once-in-a-lifetime Hall of Fame honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dick. Our next inductee into the NSMA Hall of Fame is a man that I'm proud to call a coworker. Though we only met for the first time right before COVID during our CFB 150 celebration at ESPN. I am speaking of the great Bill Rhoden. And to introduce him tonight is his daughter, Raisa Lopez Rhoden.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Rhoden's daughter, and I'm so happy to be honoring my dad tonight. When reflecting on what I would say to introduce my dad and condense 31 years of knowing him into approximately 2 minutes, naturally, my mind went in a lot of different directions. For one, I could speak about his brilliance. First internalized when he used to proofread my high school, college, and even graduate school papers and zap a run-on sentence into a single word that illuminated so simply yet dynamically what I was trying to convey. Or I could speak about the fond memories I have of getting a chance to travel the world with him, attending some of the most notable sporting events of all time and watching him in action. Like the time I got to meet Muhammad Ali after an interview, or when I was no more than 7 and Charles Barkley picked me up and put me on his shoulders after a press conference. And maybe it'd be the time when I got to meet Serena and Venus Williams at Wimbledon and read his remarkable account of the event after the fact. There's so many things I could say about my dad and the incredible career he's built. But after weeks of thinking about this and finally putting pen to paper, more recently, I decided what I wanted to focus on tonight is my dad's character. My dad is a man of integrity and goes above and beyond in everything he does, especially when it comes to his generosity of his time and doing things for others. This is evidenced by his courage and never shying away from a tough conversation. Not only that, but being brave enough to amplify these conversations on a global stage, even when his opinion is controversial. This unrelenting focus on doing the right thing versus the expected or popular thing has allowed him to be a role model to so many and lead with purpose versus expectation of others, which I know is not always easy despite how he makes it look. I mentioned that my dad goes above and beyond, not only in his work, as many of us know, but as a friend, a mentor to the Rhoden Fellows, and as a father. One example of this that remains fresh in my mind is an 8th grade science project, when I was tasked with building a solar-powered house. My natural instinct, of course, was to do some research on what a solar-powered house was, a little web surfing on how a solar panel house works, and follow instructions on how to build the replica. Pretty simple. My dad, on the other hand, thought it would be important that I not only deeply understand the what and the how, but also the why, and furthermore, the implications of living in a solar-powered house in terms of how it may affect one's day-to-day experience. One thing led to another, and he ultimately ended up traveling to Arizona. I remember him driving, he supposedly was there on work, where he interviewed a woman who lived in a real solar-powered house, transcribed the interview, complete with videos and images, and shared it with me so I could build features on my replica that would make it as realistic and true to form as possible. Goes without saying, I got an A on the project. This may seem like an extreme or even a silly example, but amazingly, I have countless similar stories. The common denominator being that my dad's passion, resilience, and integrity have had profound and lasting impacts on those around him. In closing, I'd like to share a quote that he shared with me recently over dinner by the great Howard Thurman. Not only was this quote so timely as I continue to navigate my own personal and professional journey, but it really stuck with me because it embodies so much of who my dad is. The quote goes, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." Thank you, Dad, for leading by example and showing me and so many others in this room, through your tremendous career in journalism, what can be created when you find what makes you come alive. I'm so proud of all that you've accomplished, all that you'll continue to accomplish, and this induction is an incredibly well-deserved honor. I'm so happy to welcome up to the stage my dad and my personal inspiration, William Charles Roden.
Jim, see, I'm telling you, man, it doesn't get any better than that. Really. First of all, Dave and the association, thank you so much for this honor and giving me an opportunity to do this in front of my daughter, who's the crown jewel of my life. She's the other half of my heartbeat, and it's just wonderful, right? He said, thank you so much. There are a couple of proud moments. A little more about you and then more about me. But one of the proudest moments of my life was the first time I held you, October 1990. The second proudest moment was just 2 months ago when I walked you down the aisle, Bryce's new bride. She just got married. And for those of you, that moment who've got daughters, particularly the only daughter, it is one of the most unbelievable experiences in life that I'm still dealing with. But it was the proudest day of my life. A, because I didn't trip. There was, the whole moment where, all the emotion and the day and blah, 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 blah. Then you walk up to the moment where you walk her down the aisle and, you're always wondering how this is going to play out. And then you get to her and, she said, "Dad, don't step on my veil." But I didn't. Congratulations. This is a tremendous honor, and largely, I'm looking at Ryan and Shaughnessy, I'm looking at Jim, all these tremendous people. Our industry is just, there's so many talented people in our industry. And the thing about it, and I want to say that I know that this night is a lot about everything we've done, but really this night is about the young people in this room. And if you're really wise and you're young, you're going to listen to these stories you've heard. Bob referenced the young man who interrupted me while I was telling a war story and pulled me over to gently. Great job, by the way. Kind of borderline, but great job. You did it. It's okay. You get a B+. But for the young people here, I think there's so much wisdom. If you heard these numbers, 48 years, 50 years. Tomorrow I'm flying out to Phoenix. I'm going to give the commencement address to the Cronkite graduating class. And I thought that you talk about, Jim, symmetry, how tonight we're talking about sort of a career you've mounted over 40-something years, 48 years. And then tomorrow you're going to be talking to these 24-year-olds who probably have no idea of 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And not only that, what it takes to knock down that kind of time in this industry. And the thing that's so wonderful about just about everybody who's been inducted is how they do it with so much enthusiasm. You know, I spent 34 years at the New York Times, and I lost track of time because I was just so much into what I was doing, and it was so enjoyable. There were times when I'd stop. You know, I don't know, Dick, if you do that, we'd stop and say, damn, they're paying me for doing this? You know, it's not work at all. It's just, we just drench ourselves in the enjoyment of what we do. And that's why I respect about everybody who's been awarded. Just a couple other things. One of the joys, like I said, I spent 34 years at the New York Times. I was 4 years at the Baltimore Sun, 4 years at Ebony Magazine, 18 months at the Afro-American newspaper, where my mentor was a man named Sam Lacey. I don't know how many have heard of him, but if you haven't, Google him. Sam Lacey was the legendary sports editor of the Afro-American newspaper. He had his first job when he was 22. He wrote his last column at the age of 99 from the hospital bed. And I'm not sure why that always sticks in my mind, but it just tells me this is forever. You know, this is forever. This job is almost like part of who we are. And Sam was inducted into the Baseball Writers Wing of the Hall of Fame in 1996. Now here's a guy who had to cover they wouldn't let him into the press box. They wouldn't let Sam into the press box. He had to sometimes cover games on top of the press box, or sometimes they put him behind the dugout, you know. And he would tell me these types of stories. And people like that are a source of inspiration for me. You know, whenever you talk about hard times, and you tell a lot of young people, there's nothing like digging into your history. Nicole mentioned stories that you told that people didn't want to hear. And that's our history in this country. There are a lot of stories that people do not want to hear, really ugly truth. But it's who we are, and we have to confront it, or else we'll never be free. And that's kind of what my life has been about, is doing my part to make this country live up to the creativist foundation. And like Raisa said, it's not always easy, it's not always fun. You don't make a lot of friends doing it sometimes. I wish I could go into a press box and, like a lot of my colleagues, you know, tell jokes and just enjoy the moment. But I walk into press boxes and I see no African Americans. I'm the only one. You walk in, you see no women. And that bothers me. You know, and I guess it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing that you have that kind of consciousness, but it's a curse because you can't sleep. And I wish I could ignore it. You know, I wish I could just blow it off, but you can't. And it's because people like Sam Lacey, ancestors I have, you know, some of whom never breathed a free breath in their lives, but they believed in the dream of this country, and I do as well. Last thing before I go down that road, I want to acknowledge my new family at the Undefeated. I've been there since 2016, and you guys have made being there so much fun. You know, you kind of wonder after you've been at a place for, 30-something years, and you're wondering about the next step. And you guys have made continue to write so much fun. I tell you, Monique Jones, who's our managing editor, we've known each other for years, bumping, covering beats, being in locker rooms. Now, Monique is a managing editor. My good friend, John X. Miller. John and I have known each other for decades, around 30 years. And it's just such a joy and a blessing and a pleasure being able to work closely with you day to day. And it's a funny thing, and I want to also acknowledge Rob King, who's Vice President at ESPN, really done tremendous work for the Undefeated, just making it a great place to be. And one of the joys of my life now, I think my life is totally about passing the torch back to a younger generation. At a certain point in your life, that's kind of all it's about. It's really all it's about. And not just passing the torch to the younger generation, but making them take it, snatch it. And in 2016, ESPN Disney started something called the Rodin Fellows. I went to an HBCU. I went to Morgan State College, a university in Baltimore. And, I'm 22 years old. And who would have thought that 48 years later, I'd still be doing this, still be writing and enjoying it. And we said that why don't we create a fellowship of young African-American kids at HBCUs. We'll choose 6 every year, and they'll get a full fellowship, and it'll basically be like a master's experience as undergraduates. And we've just named our 5th class. 2 of them are here. I'd like to acknowledge them. Alexis Davis, there at that table. Stand up, Alexis. It's not like you're going to get this opportunity again. And East Dockery. Yeah. And one of the joys has been, and I think a lot of you who mentor kids realize, one of the joys is that with every graduating class, you get notes back from kids who are now starting their careers and are working at this TV station or working at this newspaper, and it's really a joy. So that's that. And the last thing I wanted to say, Raisa, you actually stole my line about Howard Thurman, but it's worth repeating. It's I've got that quote that she read from the great Howard Thurman in my kitchen over the sink. Because sometimes our lives is all about purpose and meaning, and sometimes you ask yourself, okay, now what now? What next? I think, Peter, we were talking about that. You retire and then you say, okay, what now? What next? I'd probably never plan to, quote unquote, retire. Somebody says that, it's like, no, man, I don't even know what that means. But the thing that I'd like to leave, particularly the young people here with, when you kind of ask yourself that question about what now, what next, I'll repeat it. Howard Thurman said, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So thank you very much for this honors. One more thing that's helped make me come alive. I appreciate it, I respect it, and thank you guys very much. God bless.
All right, if all of our state winners for sportscasting, if you would please report to this side of the stage, it's time to start the greatest Christmas parade you'll ever see. And we might actually get it in before Christmas. Now to handle the duties for honoring our state honorees, that'll be the great Doug Logan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ryan. No, please keep your seats. Will Hall of Fame inductee Jim Nantz please join me on stage? Thank you. Thank you, Jim. A lot of folks are enjoying receiving a round of applause tonight. I'd like to offer one for our outstanding Master of Ceremonies. Great job, Ryan. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Let's meet our 2019 and/or 2020 NSMA State Sportscasters of the Year. From Alabama for both 19 and 20, the play-by-play voice of the South Alabama Jaguars, co-host of the syndicated daily statewide morning radio sports talk show, The Press Box. 2 straight wins for J.D. Byers. From the District of Columbia, he's the sports director at WTOP, 25-year play-by-play announcer of the NBA's Washington Wizards, and 26 seasons as the television voice of the DC United. He co-anchored NBC4's Emmy Award-winning coverage of the Nationals World Series Victory Parade. First honor for Dave Johnson. From the District of Columbia, 16 seasons serving as radio play-by-play voice of the Washington Nationals. His memorable calls include Howie Kendrick's 10th inning grand slam in Game 5 of the National League Division Series and the game-winning homer in Game 7 of the 2019 World Series. First recognition, Dave Jagler. From the District of Columbia, decade-long radio play-by-play voice of the Washington Capitals. He was on the call for Alex Ovechkin's 700th career NHL goal and broadcast the Caps' appearance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. First win for John Walton. From Georgia, he's the first Savannah area sports anchor honored here. He covers local sports in southeast Georgia and the South Carolina Lowcountry. He works with the Georgia Southern Sports Network and news anchors on the side. First win, Frank Solkowski. From Iowa, 17 years at KWWL-TV in Waterloo, where he serves as sports anchor and reporter. He spent much of 2020 featuring coaches and athletes persevering through a year of COVID. First win for Mark Woodley. From Kentucky, he's the sports director at LEX 18 in Lexington, the official station of the Kentucky Wildcats. He also co-hosts a nightly show called BBN Tonight, focusing on UK athletics. First honor for Keith Farmer. From Michigan, he hosts The Drive with Jack weekday afternoons on Spotlight Radio and Press Pass with Jack Ebling on Fox 47 in Lansing. He calls the high school state championships in football and hoops, and he's working on book number 9, a 3-time sports writer of the year, now a 2-time sportscaster of the year, Jack Ebling. From Minnesota, he's the voice of the Golden Gophers and sports director at the Minnesota News Network. In 2019, he called an 11-win Gopher football season and an Outback Bowl triumph over Auburn. A previous winner in Iowa, now his 5th honor overall, Mike Grimm. From Montana, both 19 and 2020, in his 6th year as voice of the Grizzlies, calling over 100 games in 4 sports. He co-hosts a show for ESPN Radio in Missoula, and his top highlight was calling Grizzly football's 10-win season and a trip to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs. 3 wins for the newly engaged Riley Corcoran. From New Hampshire in 2019, he worked as a play-by-play voice of the Southern New Hampshire University basketball and continued serving as color commentator for UNH football. He also broadcast for Dartmouth and St. Anselm College, as well as trackside play-by-play of New Hampshire Roller Derby. 2nd win for Justin McIsaac. Also in New Hampshire, as part of the UNH athletics communications staff for more than a decade, he's worked for the Wildcat Sports Radio Network since '98. He's currently the radio voice of UNH hockey and the school's associate AD. 8th honor for Mike Murphy. From New York, it is 12th year as sports director at News 12 Long Island. He's a 16-time Emmy Award winner. He also works with MSG Network and was the lead anchor for coverage of the Islanders' runs to the Stanley Cup Finals, the Knicks' return to the playoffs, and the return of the U.S. Open. First win, Kevin Marr. From North Carolina, nearly a quarter of a century hosting the David Glenn Show, which is in its 13th year of regional syndication, reaching more than 300 cities and towns across North Carolina. He also contributes to the ACC Sports Journal and the ACCsports.com. 2nd honor, David Glenn. Also from North Carolina, the 26-year voice of the Demon Deacons on the Wake Forest Sports Network from Learfield. He calls football and basketball as well as the play-by-play of Wake Forest baseball for the ACC network. Fifth recognition, Stan Cotton. From North Carolina, in his third decade as the voice of NC State football and basketball on the Wolfpack Sports Network, 2020 saw him calling games from a studio in Raleigh. Second honor for Gary Hahn. From North Dakota, he's the sports director at WDAY in Fargo and lead television play-by-play voice of the North Dakota State Bisons in football and basketball, as well as the state high school championship tournaments. First trip to Winston-Salem, Dom Izzo. From North Dakota, the lead play-by-play voice for North Dakota high school athletics on Midco Sports. He also co-produces and hosts a weekly one-hour highlight show for Midco. First honor for Jody Norstead. From Rhode Island, fourth year as sports director at WLNE-TV in Providence, he covers the Friars, Rhody Rams, the Bryant Bulldogs, and served as the TV voice of the Brown Bears. He also reported on the end of a 50-year run for the Paw Sox in Rhode Island. Third win for Nick Coit. From South Carolina, 15 years at WCIV-TV in Charleston. As sports director, he covered the Clemson Tigers National Championship. He captured a regional Edward R. Murrow Award for his coverage of the death and funeral of the winningest high school football coach of all time, Somerville's John McKissick. Second honor for Scott Eisberg. From Texas, 35 years behind the mic for the Baylor Bears on their sports network. He's also the lead announcer for Baylor's third-tier TV package, which includes volleyball, soccer, women's basketball, baseball, softball, acrobatics, and tumbling. First recognition, John Morris. From Vermont, she was the lead sports anchor at WVNY and WFFF-TV in Burlington, specializing in meaningful feature stories while covering the Vermont Catamounts and high school sports. She currently serves as sports director at WXII 12 Noon News, that is, in Winston-Salem. First honor for Lauren Walsh. West Virginia, 25-year sports anchor at WSAZ-TV in Huntington. He earned an Edward R. Murrow Emmy Award for his documentary on the 50th anniversary of the Marshall Air disaster in 1970, called A Change of Season 50 Novembers Ago. Sixth recognition, Keith Morehouse. And from Wisconsin, the play-by-play voice of the Milwaukee Brewers on radio and TV since 2015. He also handles duties for Fox College Sports, football and basketball on Fox, FS1, and the Big Ten Network. First honor for Jeff Levering. Ladies and gentlemen, how about one more great round of applause for all of our state sportscasters of the year and all of tonight's honorees. Thank you.
My man Doug was rolling them through there. Great job, and congratulations to all. If any of your friends didn't show up, I'm just going to take theirs home with me, because I've never won anything here. I'm not bitter, I'm just on the board, that's all. Someone who does win here every single year, it seems, is a man who's become known for what they call the Woj bombs. Adrian Wojnarowski's latest Woj bomb was that he was not able to make it here today. He wasn't feeling well and had to bail on us at the last second and sent his apologies. But he won our 2019 National Sportswriter of the Year. That is, it's rarefied air for anyone to win one of these, but it is almost unheard of for someone to win 3 in a row. And Woj has certainly done that, and anyone in this room who knows him, and I know everyone follows him on Twitter because I've seen his numbers, he is as good a man as he is a reporter, and we appreciate that very much. Did Woj send us a message? Do we have a message? No. I'm going to text him later and congratulate him on behalf of all of us. Another man who is here seemingly every year is our 2019 National Sportscaster of the Year, and that's Kevin Harlan, who was not able to make it because he's one of the busiest human beings on the face of planet Earth. I let Kevin know I was glad he wasn't here because a couple years ago I was behind his family as they were unloading out of 2 SUVs by the arena, and that's the best looking family I've ever seen in my life. And I asked his son, I said, do y'all know that we're just a bunch of sports writers with like barbecue sauce on our ties and our shirt tails hanging out? Y'all are overdressed for this. But Kevin Harlan, congratulations, our 2019 National Sportscaster of the Year. Another man who I've gotten to know just because of this event over the years is another almost annual winner and thusly of our national awards, and thusly is also a Hall of Fame inductee here at the National Sports Media Association. I'm talking about Tom Verducci. I have a couple of stories I've told about Tom over the years, but I think the first 8 hours of this going pretty well, so I'm just going to cut those stories short, and I'll share those at the bar later. But to introduce Tom is a man who actually just hired away my editor from ESPN.com, Stephen Cannella, the co-editor-in-chief at Sports Illustrated.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person with you tonight. It's great that everyone is together under one roof again this year for the NSMA Awards. I look forward to being back there with you again in 2022. I especially regret not being able to travel tonight because, well, the guy I'm here to introduce has never met an assignment or a deadline that he couldn't hit, regardless of circumstances. But we'll get to more on that in a second. Tonight, Tom Verducci takes his place in the NSMA Hall of Fame. I thought about doing what he does every January when he breaks down his ballot for the Baseball Hall of Fame, making a thoughtful, eloquent case for why he deserves a spot in this esteemed club. But that's not really necessary, and besides, Dave Goren wants us to keep these short. Anyone who has read his pieces in Sports Illustrated or seen his broadcast work on Fox and the MLB Network knows Tom is one of the most talented, most authoritative, and most respected figures in sports media. And in the long history of Sports Illustrated, you won't find a more insightful, a more lyrical, or a more literary voice. Okay, I'll give you a few of his greatest hits. 3-time National Sports Writer of the Year, Emmy winner, best-selling author, some of the most memorable, most groundbreaking pieces in Sports Illustrated history. He's even played for the Blue Jays and umpired a big league spring training game, all in pursuit of a story. But what truly sets Tom apart are the creativity and the character we get to see working with him every day. Tom began his career in newspapers in the 1980s and has been with SI since 1993. But I'm continually amazed by the energy and the enthusiasm he still brings to his craft after nearly 4 decades. For Tom, every day is opening day. Every story is a new window of understanding for him and his readers into the game he loves. Tom would be a singular talent if he were just a writer or just a broadcaster. His ability to shine at both is, frankly, a little unnerving. Most of you probably think that the craziest thing that happened in the wee hours of November 3rd, 2016 was the Chicago Cubs finally winning the World Series. But I know that nothing was more insane than Tom broadcasting the historic moment live for Fox, interviewing Chris Bryant on camera around 1 a.m., and 6 hours later filing an impeccable, instant classic, 5,000-word magazine story for a special fast close edition of SI that everyone was reading online that morning. Doing one of those things would be the crowning achievement in any media career. Tom routinely does both, often simultaneously. With all due respect to that Ohtani guy, this is the most impressive two-way talent that I have ever seen. Speaking of always hitting his deadlines, Tom's going to kill me for bringing this up, but ask him later tonight how many pieces he wrote this postseason with a broken wrist, before he went to the doctor. I'm telling you, nothing comes between this guy and a story. Baseball can be the most poetic of sports, both in how it's played and how its stories are told. In poetry and sports, Tom lives in and Tom embodies that intersection. Through our careers, I've had the privilege of working with him as his fact checker, as a writing colleague, as his editor, and as a fellow baseball nerd. I'm proud to call him a friend, and now I'm proud to call him a Hall of Famer. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Tom Verducci.
someone with the last name starts with V. I'm used to being patient. The whole alphabetical thing, sitting in the back of the classroom. I don't want to say the night has gone on long, but I see Dave is constantly checking his watch because he knows that tuxedo has to be back at a certain time. Seriously, Dave, thanks to you and NSMA, because the hospitality here has just been amazing. I mean, you make a kid from Jersey feel like he's home, and I know that because this morning for breakfast, I had fried chicken on a biscuit with Texas Pete. Now, if you see me start chugging cheer wine, it's time to go back to Jersey. Congrats to all our award winners. At the risk of, I don't want to slight anybody, but 3 I consider really trusted, admirable colleagues that I really want to mention. Dick Stockton, just an honor to do baseball games with you. A pleasure to do a couple of games with you for Fox on Saturdays. It was an honor then, honor today, it always will be. Rick Telander, you set the bar at SI. Happy to join that, really, I consider an all-star group of writers when I got there. The pinnacle of sports journalism. And Bill Nack, my definition, he was the epitome of this, of greatness, is making the difficult look easy, and his writing did that. This really is the highest honor for me. I consider myself so lucky. I have many, many people to thank, but I have to start with my wife, Kirsten. You know, as much as we're able to travel and go to these amazing places, you know, the best place is always, at the end of the road trip, the end of the World Series especially, is coming home, so thank you. And I also have to thank, obviously, my parents. I mean, this is all I wanted to do. As a kid, all I wanted to do was write. The broadcasting stuff came later, but from my mom, I got this idea that I could do anything. That is so empowering when you're a kid. You're not sure what to do in the world. And anything that I did, she thought it was the greatest thing in the world. That confidence was embedded in me at a very young age. And then my dad was a high school football and baseball coach. He kind of looked like Vince Lombardi. He coached like Vince Lombardi. He was really good. So imagine if your high school coach is Vince Lombardi. He's also your dad. You learn a lot about discipline. And for me, it was preparation more than anything. I saw the work that he put in, and it wasn't even really considered work. It was the fact that he was doing something that he wanted to do. And I never remember any kind of fatherly lecture like sitting me down to tell me the ways of the world or what I should do growing up. Just by observing him, I realized he was doing something that he really loved. So that lesson of do something you love what you do, was something that I picked up from him. I mean, our house was littered with game film and football diagrams, but I knew when that game was played on Saturday or Sunday, and I played for him in high school, I and our teams were never so prepared. And he also gave me an insight into this profession. I don't think he knew what he was doing, but I think it's really benefited me to see what goes on behind the scenes. If you're the son of a coach, you really understand the inner workings of a game. And you know that game can live with you throughout the week, not just as fans. We can walk away from the game and get back to our everyday lives. So for me, the way I've covered baseball, to me, is inside out rather than outside in. I always wanted to know what made this person tick, what made this team work, to get the stories behind the story. And by the way, Kirsten, I know you got a little bit worried there when you heard Bill Roden talk about Sam Lacey writing columns when he was 99. She earlier listened to Jamie and Dick talk about going on these European cruises and playing golf and tennis, looking forward to retirement. Now she's got me worried about writing stories when I'm 99. But as I mentioned, I wanted to write. It was really my first love. And this kind of gives you an idea of what this award means to me, because this is all I wanted to do was write, and sports seemed like the cool thing to do. I was playing sports all the time with my brothers, school, high school, college. Why not combine the two? So my first job, really out of college, was at Newsday in New York. And I'll never forget this. I sat down, Dick Sandler, great editor, Jim Tetman, I know, knows Dick from our old Newsday days, came by. It was kind of these new things called computers we were writing on. Believe it or not, when I first got to college, I was writing stories on typewriters. I'm writing this story, and my first day at Newsday, I don't even know what the story was, but I never forget Dick Sandler walking over to me and saying, don't be nervous. You're not writing for the Daily Collegian anymore. And I took it kind of like, why would he even say that? Because for me, it didn't matter, and it's true to this day, it didn't matter who I was writing for, what the size of the audience was. All I could do is the best that I could do. And I was around some people covering, back in the day, baseball and for newspapers, and they knew the circulation on the Saturday paper was less than it was on Sunday. And you hear the phrase, well, on a Friday night game, well, it's only the Saturday paper, kind of mail it in that night. I never wanted to do that. For me, it was do the best that you can every single time, regardless of the audience on television, circulation of the news media. And I think about, something that, I'll paraphrase Michelangelo here. He said the mistake people make is not aiming so high that you can't reach it. It's aiming so low that you do. So for me, aiming high didn't mean like, oh, someday I want to get to Fox Sports. Someday I want to get to Sports Illustrated. It was never that. It was next assignment. How can I make the next assignment, the next broadcast, the best that can possibly be? For me, a lot of that was preparation, and again, going back to the lessons I learned from my father. And I would say that too to, and I'm glad Bill mentioned this, that to the young people in the room, or if you have young people want to get into this business or any business, I would say make sure you are invested with passion in the moment. Because awards are great, and what you've done in the past is great, but the past is where your ego lives. The future is where your anxiety lives. The best version of who you can be is really in the present, staying in the moment. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially when you're young and you're trying to get ahead. But I can honestly tell you, when I was young, it wasn't about getting somewhere, it was about the next assignment. And then next assignment becomes a year of assignments. And then before you know it, it's 40 years of covering Major League Baseball. And it's like, how does it go by so fast? It goes by so fast by doing it one assignment at a time. I mentioned I've been able to go amazing places, All-Star games, World Series, went to Japan one year when we didn't have a World Series here. Stephen Cannella mentioned the Blue Jays story, which is far and away my favorite story to do. I mean, it was the ultimate fantasy camp. I played a week with the Toronto Blue Jays. And this was like 20 some odd years after I was playing in college. And I mean, I wasn't really prepared for it. My whole goal was to get through a week of spring training, Major League spring training, without blowing out my hamstring. So I actually had a story to write. But I did get one at bat in an intra-squad game. And if you haven't heard, it was the greatest pop-up in baseball history. Actually made contact. Well, those are kind of the opportunities that this job, if you will, has given me. But again, it gets back to doing something that I always wanted to do. I was a kid delivering newspapers, a New York Star Ledger. Actually, their Sunday newspaper was kind of like my weight training program. It was so big. But the Saturday paper, again, was very small. And I remember just throwing those newspapers from the middle of the street to doorsteps, 6:30 in the morning, every day, sometimes hitting those aluminum storm doors that people have, waking people up. But the idea of having the newspaper in my hand first thing in the morning, I thought was so cool. I would literally get the news before everybody else. This again, Rick, is a newspaper world I'm talking about way back when. And it was something cool for me as someone who would always watch baseball. And then to read a story in the next day's paper about what really happened. What were the stories behind the stories? What did the players say after the game? Why did the manager decide to pull this pitcher from the game? I was fascinated by finding out the stories behind the stories and thinking to myself, man, that'd be cool to get that kind of access to tell those kind of stories. So that was something that to me was, I guess it was a dream, but I never thought it would lead to all this. I was happy every step of the way doing what I wanted to do. So for an award like this, which I think is the highest award that you can get, because of those three words, Hall of Fame, but also because it's the ultimate respect to your peers, that really resonates with me more than anything else. So I must say, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you have an understanding of how much this means to me, because this is my life's passion to do this. And I hope anybody who gets into, one of the young people here today, get into this field, or whatever your field is, that you do pursue it, chase it with passion, and don't let anybody take that passion away, because I'm proof it can take you places. So again, I thank you so much. Again, I can't even call this as a dream for me to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for the NSMA. If there's a award that's even better than a dream, this is it. Thank you very much.
Tom Verducci. Okay, we've come to the close of the evening, unless anybody wants to stick this out for a couple more days. All of our living Hall of Famers, please join us on the stage. I mentioned at the start of the night, I mentioned the traditions of this ceremony dating back decades, and this is my favorite of those. If all of our living Hall of Famers will join us on stage, we're going to end the evening with Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and they get bats. And then you can join Dave Goren in the hotel bar.